Iran is making preparations to make sure that this will be lifted either through political means or through military means.
Ali Akbar, as the world waits to see if the path toward diplomacy can continue and if the talks in Islamabad can restart, the news yesterday was that the IRGC had seized 2 ships in the Strait of Hormuz, and just in the past hour or so, we're now hearing that the U.S. has seized another ship in the Indian Ocean. What does that indicate to you as far as the prospect for more negotiations going forward?
The biggest negotiations in Islamabad are 2 things. One is, Trump's assumption that the U.S. has escalation dominance while it doesn't. And second is Trump's vulgar, vicious language, very disrespectful language he's using against Iran and sending mixed messages. He keeps changing his position every other hour. This is a big impediment to any negotiations. But Iran has made it very clear. If the blockade is lifted and Trump remains committed to diplomacy, the way is open for negotiations in Islamabad to put an end to this war of aggression. Without these 2 conditions, without these 2 obstacles removed, the path to diplomacy is closed.
Ali Akbar, I'm glad you mentioned that because I did want to ask you specifically about that. We have heard several times from the Iranians that there will be no further negotiations unless the U.S. lifts its blockade, its naval blockade of Iranian ports. I just want to ask you, at a time when the Pakistani mediators are trying to bring these 2 sides together, and it seems as though the Gulf is only widening, is there anything else that the U.S. might be able to do, any kind of conciliatory gesture that would perhaps convince that the Iranians that it would be okay to send more people to Islamabad, rather, for more talks?
End piracy and lift the illegitimate blockade against Iran. That will be a game changer. Otherwise, Iran will continue to make preparations for the next step. And Iran has already prepared several steps to move forward if the U.S. resorts to escalating this war of aggression. So should the Americans return to wisdom and put an end to this, piracy, which is state terrorism, it is against international law, that will be a game changer and will facilitate return to talks in Islamabad.
All right. Ali Akbar Durrani, researcher at the Center for Strategic Studies, joining us there live from Tehran. Thank you so much for being with us here on Al Jazeera. Great to get your perspective. Some developing news out of Gaza now. At least 3 people have been killed in a strike that targeted a car in central Gaza. Israeli attacks have killed more than 780 Palestinians during the ceasefire since it came into effect in October. Well, let's cross live now to Hind Al-Khudri, who's joining us from Gaza City. Hind, can you just tell us what you know about this latest strike?
Well, this is a strike that attacked a car that was traveling on Salahuddin Road, and inside this car was 3 civil defense workers that were killed. After this attack, there were a couple of injuries that were also transferred to Al-Aqsa Hospital. But this is not the first time the Israeli forces attack civil defense teams. They have been attacking vehicles carrying civil defense teams during the ceasefire.
Hello, this is DrPaulCottrell, and we are live on Rumble, YouTube, and my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All these videos are for free. Please help support the work that I do by subscribing to the channels, sharing the links, making sure that you go to the website and help out. You can donate. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or Buy Me a Coffee on my website. You can also be a paid member to my Patreon and Substack channel as a paid member. And that helps support the news that I do every day. So please help support. Greatly appreciate it. In addition, I have great products on my store, ebooks, supplements, and course material on immunology and pulmonology. And take a look at them, especially the supplements. They will help to slow down the aging process and allow you to get healthy. So some of the products that I offer are antioxidants, very strong antioxidants. Very strong antioxidants. So you can get the C60. C60 is 1,000 times stronger than vitamin C. Take a teaspoon a day every day. And what this will do is soak up free radicals. I've been using this every day since 2016. So 10 years. Now what this will do is it's going to soak up those free radicals, help bring down stress in the cell and the tissue, and bring down inflammation. Now, when it's soaking up those free radicals, your mitochondria is going to improve and you're going to have more energy in the cell. So you'll have more ATP. And more ATP means that your organ systems will perform better. So your immune system, your endocrine system will perform better. Your cardiovascular health will be better because you're soaking up free radicals and lowering the concentrations of oxidized LDL. When you reduce the concentrations of oxidized LDL, you're reducing plaque formation. So you're helping your cardiovascular health. And it's also going to help with your brain function by bringing down that inflammation, bringing down those free radicals within the neuron. Your neurons are going to perform better. Your mitochondria will perform better in the neuron. You'll have more energy in the at the neuron level. And because of that, you'll have higher production of neurotransmitters, and you're going to have this positive neuroplasticity that leads to faster thinking, better memory. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the C60. You can get it in MCT coconut oil, avocado oil, and extra virgin olive oil. You can get it in a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, or an 8 ounce configuration. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Make sure you use discount 5. You get $5 off. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. And also olive leaf extract. Olive leaf extract is a dual purpose product. This is going to bring down your inflammation. It's also going to help with your lipid profile. When you're lowering LDL levels and increasing your HDL levels, what will happen is that you'll have less plaque formation. So that's really important. It's a dual purpose supplement that you should be taking every day. And I try to provide dual purpose supplements so you get more bang for your buck. And I'm telling you how to stack these to get the synergy that allows you to slow down the aging process. That's where the magic is when it comes to anti-aging. It's about stacking the supplements properly and having using them continuously so you can have that compound effect. Because you can slow down aging by slowing down the methylation of your genes. If you do that, then you'll maintain your youthful gene expression. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. So what's in the news right now is the United States intercepted some tankers that were trying to break the blockade. And oil did go up a little bit in pre-market, but it started drifting back down. Right now, oil is at $93.64 a barrel. And the equity market for the futures is at 7,149. It's down 22 points. So there's no further understanding of when the ceasefire is going to end or if it's going to continue. Trump last night did say that he was going to extend the ceasefire 3 to 5 days. Day before that, he said the ceasefire was continuing indefinitely. So he's wishy-washy. He's going back and forth. You don't get really any true resolution on what's going on in terms of, is there a true de-escalation or is this just rearmament for more conflict in the region? So oil is above $90 a barrel. So it's, just below 94. Like I said yesterday, 94 is going to be a resistance level. Now, it was trading pre-market above 94, and then it drifted back down as we're getting closer to the New York Open. So it's important to realize that 94 is a resistance level that could be broken if there is further conflict, and then it might drift back down to about 88. And I said this yesterday, that there's probably a trading range between 88 to 94 for WTI. And natural gas is drifting down in pre-market. It's trading at 2.683. It was in the 2.7 handle not too long ago. So who knows? Is oil going to continue to go up, or is it going to continue to go down? It's heavily predicated on what's going on in the Middle East. Now, that's probably the biggest news in terms of oil and the markets. Some data did come out, economic data did come out today, showing that jobless continuing claims were up a little bit more than expected, but I don't know what the actual numbers were. It was over, I think it was over 1 million. So if that number comes in, I will let you know. Trump orders Navy to shoot boats placing mines in Hormuz Strait. That's just a breaking news right now. And that just broke. So that's what I mean. This is the reason why I'm doing this show, is because I want to archive exactly what was going on during this time period in real time, and how the markets were changing with these breaking news. So Trump just said that he ordered the Navy to blow up boats that are laying mines. So they must have some indication that there's laying of mines by Iran. Right now, oil is trading a little bit higher now. It's 93.79, and there's a little bit of a tick up in natural gas. It's now trading at 2.685. Now, what do you want to look at in terms of this movement in oil? Take a look at UCO or SCO. UCO is longing ETF 3 times leverage. SCO is shorting oil at 3 times leverage. Now, there's leverage decay, so you can't hold the ETF for very long. It's a short-term play. But the bottom line is that news just broke. And let me just give you an example of what's happening here. The news that just broke with Trump telling the Navy to knock out the ships that are laying the mines, it was trading at, just before the news broke, it was trading at 41.94 for UCO. Now it's trading at 42.54. So you can play the news with these ETFs, is my point here. So if you pay attention and you watch and you're willing to be patient, you can make some money on this news. And this is the reason why I do the show. I want to document what's going on during the Trump administration for posterity. And I want to tell you how to improve your health and how to make money in the market through news. It can be done so you're not a victim, that you're not you're not a bystander. There's too many bystanders and victims of what's happening in the world. Well, instead of whining about the people that are in the smoky room making decisions, find out how they think or what they want to happen, and place yourself accordingly so you can benefit from it. It's that simple. Instead of stop whining about the Rothschilds, stop whining about people that have access to information and move markets. Find out what they're doing and do the same thing. Stop whining. And you'll be way better off in your geriatric years. You'll have more money, you'll be healthier, and the average Joe out there will be shit out of luck. So it's up to you if you want to pay attention to me or not. But I know what I'm doing. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the great supplements that I offer, and pay attention to my advice with the market. You'll make money. All right, with that, we're going to start taking a look at the news here. Let's listen into what actually happened with this SPLC funding for it almost seems like they were funding right-wing organizations. So let's listen into National Review here.
Hey everyone, was this a scam?
Hi everyone, I'm Rena Ninen. You're looking at live pictures out of Charlottesville, Virginia. This is where violent clashes have broken out between white nationalists and counter-protests there.
I'm Rich Lowry of National Review, and that was news footage from the infamous Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia in 2017. Got a lot of attention at the time, still looms very large in progressive minds, and is worth revisiting because we just got this extraordinary indictment from the Department of Justice of the Southern Poverty Law Center, one of the most noxious groups in America, devoted, of course, to deeming any person or any group it disagrees with hate group and trying to get them shunned from polite society, defunded, etc. But according to the DOJ, it's even worse than that. The Southern Poverty Law Center has been engaged in funding organizers and leaders of the hate groups that it's devoted to fighting, including in one case, someone involved in Unite the Right. So let's take a look at this real quick. So the indictment says that starting in the 1980s, the SPLC began operating a covert network of informants. These people were referred to as field sources, or the Fs. That's relevant because of the designation of this guy we're just about to get to. He was called F37. He was a member of the online leadership chat group that planned the 2017 Unite the Right event in Charlottesville, Virginia, and attended the event at the direction of the SPLC. F37 made racist postings under the supervision of the SPLC and helped contribute transportation to the event for several attendees. To underline the point, the Southern Poverty Law Center was funding an organizer of a racist event that was played up as one of the foremost national traumas in America over the last decade. And the suggestion is that the SPLC funded figures like this and organizations like this in order to be able to turn around and say, look, what a terrible racism problem we have in this country. Give us more resources so we can fight it. Now, the SPLC says in its defense, no, we're just funding informants so we can know what's happening with these organizations, so we can monitor them and check them and fight them. But this wasn't this guy with the Unite the Right. He wasn't just a friend of a friend who was hearing about what was going on. He was helping making it happen. He was getting people to the event. He was planning it. He was posting racist things online, and just objectively and morally funding someone doing that is a terrible thing. And on the face of it is perverse and corrupt, given the stated mission of the SPLC. It's be a little bit like the NRA for some reason, funding pro-gun control members of Congress or pro-lifers. They would never do this. Opening abortion clinics so they can turn around and say, look what a horror abortion is. And these kind of guys that are engaged in this kind of activity, you know, members of the Klan or random racists online, they're not Jeff Bezos, right? Don't have huge sources of alternative income coming in. So any amount of money the SPLC is giving them potentially keeps them in the racist game. And the list of figures that were bankrolled by the SPLC is really incredible. Take a look at the indictment again. We have so-called F Unknown, who's the imperial wizard of the United Clans of America. We've got F42, the former chairman of the neo-Nazi National Alliance. Then we get F30, who led the National Socialist Party of America and was a former director of a faction of the Aryan nations. And we get F43, the reported national president of American Front. Now that suggests these were really consequential figures in these organizations. I don't know much about clan hierarchy, but Imperial Wizard sounds like a pretty important title. Certainly titles like chairman, president, director suggest these were leading figures in these organizations, not just random foot soldiers who might hear some scuttlebutt and pass it along to the SPLC. And we are talking in some of these cases about real no kidding, money. So check this out. F9 was someone affiliated with the aforementioned National Alliance, did fundraising for them. And according to the indictment, between 14 and 23, the SPLC paid this person secretly more than $1 million. Then we get this figure F27, reported as an officer in the National Socialist Movement and the Aryan Nations affiliated Sadistic Souls Motorcycle Club. No thanks. According to the indictment, between 14 and 20, the SPLC secretly paid this person more than $300,000. So that's real money, right? That can make racist work lucrative if someone is funneling those kind of dollars to you. Worse, some of these guys, the SPLC would turn around and feature them as hate figures in their materials. The former chairman of the National Alliance got $140,000 during the same time period in which he was featured, or she, I guess, was featured on the SPLC's extremist file webpage. F30, who led the National Socialist Party of America, he got $70,000 at the same time he was featured, or she again, I guess, was featured on the SPLC's extremist file webpage. Union was that they pretend to pay us, we pretend to work. Well, here, these weren't pretend racists, I assume, but the SPLC was paying them in order to oppose them. And by the way, let's get back to Charlottesville. So what happened after Charlottesville? I will argue this is an event that was exaggerated, involved a couple hundred people, shouldn't have happened, terrible. But it is true that someone was killed. People were hurt. There were real, no kidding fights in the streets. So did the SPLC conclude after that, we can't have anything to do with anyone associated in any manner with this atrocity? No, they kept.
Exactly. They were fueling the flames. They wanted to set it in motion to try to demonize. He hit it right on the nail here. It wasn't like, well, we're trying to infiltrate and find out their structure and try to, stop it. Nope, they were feeding it. They wanted to get worse and metastasize.
That organizer for years afterwards. Let's go back to the indictment. Reminder, F37 is the guy who was involved in planning Unite the Right. Again, that event happened in 2017. But according to the indictment, between 2015 and 2023, 6 long years later, the SPLC secretly paid F37 more than $270,000. Now, Charlottesville is quite bad, never should have happened, but another day and age, this might have been a local story or a state story. It was spun up into a national event in part to indict the right, and supposedly a bunch of racists, and to hurt Donald Trump politically. And from that time, we had this rancid.
And there's a great documentary that Stephen Bannon made that I saw last night, but it was during this time period. It was during the midterm election. All right. You have to remember this is tied into going into the midterms. Right. So Trump's already in office for his first term, Trump 1.0. And now they're getting ready to demonize the right, demonize the Republican Party, demonize Trump as they go into the midterm election. And the midterms, they did lose. So in terms of the Republican Party. But this documentary that Stephen Bannon did that I saw last night is called Blink. I think it's called Blink or Brink. The Brink, I think is what it's called. The Brink. And it shows like behind the scenes of what he was doing in terms of US politics and also in Europe. Okay. So, and there's a decent amount of it in the movie or in the documentary about this event. All right. So I highly recommend seeing The Brink by Stephen Bannon. It's on YouTube for free. All right. If you want to just watch the ads, but it's perfect to understanding what is going on behind the scenes during this time period. And the mainstream media was also trying to spin how, because Stephen Bannon was always against the globalists, right? So they were trying to spin that the term globalist is really anti-Semitic. And he kept on saying, no, it's not. This started it seemed to start with The Guardian and with the UK news networks. But it also was happening in the United States. I'm not sure where. It seemed to me that it was starting in the UK, because at that time you're talking about Brexit and all this. So there was, if people were going against the globalists, they wanted to spin it as it was anti-Semitic, and therefore you must be some sort of right-winger if you were against transnational capitalism, if you were against shipping jobs overseas, if you were against the status quo in terms of the economic framework, you must be a right-winger. So Bannon kept on saying, no, that's not the case. Globalists are the party of Davos and the Bilderberg group. And it's not necessarily anti-Semitic. It's the term globalist is a person that believes in transnational capitalism and doesn't care about their own nation state. So it was interesting in how the media was trying to spin what Bannon was saying about globalization and the issues with globalization into some sort of anti-Semitic trope. I don't think going against the globalists is anti-Semitic. But unfortunately, the far right does grab onto that now. And you're talking about 2017, 2018. So the far right has grabbed onto this now and is thinking that, well, the bankers, they're all Jewish and they must be, controlling the world. That's totally not the case. Totally not the case. All right. But the thing is there's definitely a problem with globalization. I've been saying this for a long time. We are moving into a new era called localization, not globalization. When I went to go get my MBA, it was always pushing shareholder maximization. If you can manufacture in a global market, it'll be better for you. You'll be able to manufacture at a cheaper rate. You'll be able to reach other markets. You may be able to reduce your, shipping costs. You'll be able to focus on certain regions of the world that have certain competitive competencies that will be synergistic for your organization, blah, blah, blah. So we were told in business school, that's the way to do it. But the thing is that that's not the way to do it, because what happens is that when you actually hypercharge that throughout your whole economy, you lose the economic clustering. You need to have a healthy economy. You need a multitude of different types of businesses and different types of know-how, and manufacturing is one of them. And when you make something physically, you actually learn how to improve something. That's where innovation comes in. Our world doesn't turn economically because of invention. It turns due to innovation. And there's this subtle nuance here. Invention is something new, something brand new. And a lot of times when you have something brand new, it doesn't reach the masses in a short amount of time. It takes a time to make it affordable, or people adopt it in their everyday life. So inventing something isn't necessarily where the economy is. It's innovation. And innovation is tweaking it, making it more accessible or cheaper or more user-friendly, or it's improving it. It's mutating, evolving into a better product. That's where the economy is. You can't do that if you don't make it. And this is the reason why that societies that don't manufacture don't innovate. So if you used to be a manufacturing country or company, and you start to ship it overseas, you are no longer an innovative company. You're no longer an inventive country because you don't make anything. So it's super important to understand this concept that in business schools in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, students were being trained and the business journals were pushing globalization. That's not anti-Semitic. That was a thought process from economists, from policymakers, even from international politics that led to this globalization that we have today. It's not anti-Semitic. Going after the globalists is actually saying, you know what, maybe we went too far with this, and that we need to have some economic clustering coming back to have a vibrant economy and to have that innovative spirit that making things allows.
Entering the national consciousness still hasn't gone away that Donald Trump somehow called neo-Nazis very fine people after that day, and he just didn't. He didn't. So here's a transcript, and Trump did say among the demonstrators and counter-demonstrators, you also had people that were very fine people on both sides, but then he goes on several sentences later to say, I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists because they should be condemned totally. Then we get layered on top of Charlottesville and on top of Trump's alleged reaction to it, Joe Biden's presidential run. He made the case absurdly. This guy has wanted to be president his entire adult life, that he was running for president because of those things.
Charlottesville is also home to a defining moment for this nation in the last few years. It was there on August of...
And this was orchestrated by the Democratic Party to demonize Trump, to demonize the Republicans. And you also saw this in 2023 with the almost after October 7th. You could see on campus how people were aligning themselves for the Palestinian cause, aligning themselves in this oppressor and oppressed mentality. All right. And they wanted to demonize the Republican Party. You have to remember what was happening in 2024. 2024 was the general election. So this is their modus operandi. 1 year before the midterm elections or 1 year before the actual general election, there's demonization of the Republican Party, focusing on the alt-right. And now, what do you know, so that's what happened in 2023 after October 7th. There was this almost like the Republican Party is aligned, the Republican Party is aligned with Israel. The Republican Party is aligned with going against Islam, and they're oppressors and they believe in colonialism and all this. So they were able to convince many people that came out of college to vote for Democrats. And this is the reason why Charlie Kirk was so important, was that he was able to pierce that and get the vote out to the Republican Party. But now, because the Turning Point is pretty much a defunct organization, that the Republican Party is probably going to lose in the midterms. No matter how much they try to prop up Turning Point, there's no one there. Erica Kirk can't do it. It was something special about Charlie Kirk and his way of debating. And I think people that are young, especially on campus, they want that debating, even if they disagree with the individual. And And Erica Kirk can't do that. It's not in her ethos. So the Republican Party is having a big problem here. But there was this demonization that was happening right before the general election. And now, well, we have the Republican Party. This is what the mainstream's spinning. The Republican Party is against immigrants. The Republican Party is for ICE agents coming in and tearing families apart. And the Republican Party is about war in the Middle East and all that. And so what will happen is that you have these podcasters like Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly and Candace Owens and Alex Jones. They're literally deep sixing the Republican Party by demonizing Trump's policies. And what's going to happen is that the Democratic Party is going to win the legislative branch. And things are going to be a lot worse. So, but there's these events, the point I think to really take from this is that these events are orchestrated to get some sort of public opinion, manufactured public opinion. There's a manufactured consensus that's being done here 1 year before and into the midterm or general election year. And that's exactly what happened in Charlottesville. And the proof is already there with the SPLC and how they funded it.
2017, we saw Klansmen and white supremacists and neo-Nazis come out in the open. Their crazed faces, illuminated by torches, veins bulging, and bearing the fangs of racism, chanting the same anti-Semitic bile heard across Europe in the 30s.
So is Charlottesville a scam? No, they're real racists. There was real.
And it's even more interesting because with the Charlottesville, they spun it as this is anti-Semitic. This is Nazism. All right. Now, what did we see into the general election in 2024? They pivoted towards anti-Israel, anti-Zionism, and the Democratic Party aligned themselves with the Palestinians and the IRGC. Did you see any protesting by the Democratic Party when the IRGC was massacring the Iranians as they were protesting? No. So it's flipped. In Charlottesville, they aligned themselves with the Jews because they thought that the Democrats aligned themselves with the Jews, saying that the protest what was going on in Charlottesville was Nazism, and there was this right-wing group that we have to fight. We have to get rid of the Republican Party. That's their spin on this. All right. Now, fast forward to right after October 7th, 2023. They align themselves with Islamic Jihad. And this is what I mean. The ultra-liberal will eventually eat its tail. Now, unfortunately, big podcasters out there are giving them, the Democratic Party, ammunition to be able to win in the midterms. The Republican Party there's no cohesion. And you don't have an individual to be able to tap into that new voter crowd like Charlie Kirk did in 2024. So I suspect the Republican Party, it'll be a bloodbath, literally, where they will lose a lot of seats in the House. That's what I suspect. I'd be shocked if the Republican Party is able to hold the House, and I think they'll lose the Senate too. Well, things are going to get a lot worse. But it's interesting to see this if you just step back and look at the arc of history and how they align themselves with Jews. The Democratic Party aligned themselves with Jews in 2020, in 2017, 2018, right? For the midterms. And then they didn't align themselves with the Jews and align themselves with the Palestinians for the last general election. So they're wishy-washy. It's amazing. It's amazing how because they're always going the other way. What did the Republican Party do? They supported the war in Gaza. They supported Israel going after Hamas and Hezbollah. Now, you got to keep in mind, Hamas and Hezbollah are funded by Iran. IRGC helps them. They train them and they give them money. And not just that, you have to pay attention. Hezbollah was the group that started to constitute itself in Lebanon. And we need to keep on remembering, you know, in 1980, there was the Beirut bombing. And there were many Marines that died. Well, are we gonna remember that? Now, there's a great documentary about the CIA operations that were going on hunting down Hezbollah. But when the bombing took place, and when I think it was William Casey running the CIA, his mission was to hunt them down. Now, he thought it was one cleric that wasn't involved and it was someone else. But as they were getting intelligence in the region, they started finding out that there was this thing called the Party of God, which ended up being Hezbollah. And that all came from Iran. So we need to destroy the root cause of Hezbollah and Hamas. And the root cause of Hezbollah and Hamas is Iran. And it's theocratic regime. But the Democratic Party is aligning themselves with Islamic Jihad. The Democratic Party is aligning themselves with the Party of God, aka Hezbollah.
Terrible day, never should have happened, but we had this vast edifice of meaning piled on top, this really small foundation of what really happened there. And now we know that the Southern Poverty Law Center was part of that foundation, an organization devoted supposedly to stopping things like that from happening, instead played, at least at the margins, a role in helping make it happen. And that's a disgrace. I'm Rich Lowry, over and out.
There's a growing interest in socialism among young people in America.
Yeah, that's a big problem. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the great lozenges and drops that I have. You can get the orange splash with vitamin C, and you can also get the Manuka honey lozenges. Very high quality. They have structural nanosilver, and with structural nanosilver, you're going to be able to neutralize that sore throat. Now, I also have drops, and you can get them in honey and lemon and in cherry flavor. Either get the drops or lozenges. Get a few bags for your household, for work and for the home. You never know when you need it. And when you start having that throat irritation because of the allergy season or the cold season, take them right away. It'll help to neutralize and mitigate the problem. In addition, if you're cleaning, spring cleaning the garage or the basement or just cleaning the house and you're exposed to dust or dirt or, you know, whatever, and you might get a sore throat, take them. They'll help to mitigate the problem. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the drops and the lozenges. They're made from structural nanosilver. They're perfect to mitigate sore throats. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift. Make sure you use discount 5. I want you to save some money. All caps, discount 5, and you get $5 off any order. And Clarity Factor. Clarity Factor is a very powerful neurostack. What this will do is it'll allow you to get rid of that brain fog and you can concentrate on tasks at home, at work. And clarity factor, by taking it regularly, you're going to get that positive neuroplasticity so your memory improves and you have better cognition. Because what's going to happen is that the dendritic connections will improve. And that's super important for brain health. Brain health is super important to pay attention to as you start getting older, 30, 40, 50. You start declining with mental capacity actually in your 30s. You don't see, you don't notice it, but it's happening. It's asymptomatic for most people, but it is happening. The neuroplasticity is going negatively. It's receding. There's actually it's called depression actually, but not in terms of psychological depression, but the neurons are depressing. So they're receding and the connections are less, but it's asymptomatic and it starts in your 30s, but it becomes symptomatic in your 50s. All right. And then once you get about 65 to 70, depending on how much inflammation and amyloidosis and tau buildup and toxin buildup and perfusion that you have, depends on where you are on the spectrum of decline. But you can reverse this and you can prevent it by proper diet, proper exercise, proper supplementation, keeping the inflammation down, keeping the perfusion up, giving your body the nutrients it needs to boost up those chemicals that help protect the neuron, like BDNF. And when you do that, when you get into your geriatric years, you're not going to have the cognition problems that most people have. So please, take my advice. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the clarity factor, drink filtered water with it. And by doing that with proper diet and exercise, and keeping down that inflammation with some of the other supplements that I have, it will help with your brain function. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, let's listen into Bloomberg.
The statements we hear, including the potential of ethnic transfer, annexation, etc. And then you have Iran. Again, Iran is utilizing Hezbollah as a bargaining chip in a much larger chessboard, or a pawn in a much larger chessboard. So both of these factors will play.
Maha, we have to run. We would love to get you on for a much more extensive discussion. I can't say enough about Mayaz of the Carnegie Middle East Center, her recent article in Foreign Affairs magazine, heartbreaking, blistering on Lebanon. Thank you so much for that this morning. Futures negative 19, a real Stacey. What are we waiting for, Paul? Tweets? Are we waiting for, well, we're seeing somebody else to be fired?
Well, I'm seeing that President Trump has ordered the U.S. Navy to shoot any boat putting mines in the Strait of Hormuz and vowed to step up efforts. So that's the latest communication.
His sentence, there's to be no hesitation. Additionally, our mine, quote, sweepers are clearing the strait. That, the Washington Post article got some traction yesterday.
Yeah, but essentially, Paul Sankey said no matter what happens there, it's going to take a while to untangle all the tied up infrastructure.
Futures negative 20 Dow, futures negative 260. A quiet to the tape, all in all. From New York City, it's Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
All right, so let's take a look at some other news that's popping up here. Let's go in a little bit more detail about the U.S. military intercepts Iranian oil tankers.
Navan, the #1 rated business travel platform, lets your team book work travel in one place. Flights, hotels, car.
All right, to Operation Epic Fury, President Trump revealing his timeline to Fox News for peace talks with Iran, all while the Navy maintains its blockade of the Strait of Hormuz.
And U.S. forces have intercepted 3 Iranian oil tankers in Asian waters. They're trying to round up that so-called ghost fleet.
Lucas Tomlinson is live at the White House with the very latest. Hey, Lucas. Good morning, Ainsley. Good morning, gentlemen. Right now, officials say the Iran war is at a standoff. The blockade remains in place. The Strait of Hormuz remains closed. President Trump says there is no expiration to the ceasefire, telling our own Martha McCallum on the phone, quote, there is no time pressure on this, that the 3 to 5 day window reported earlier today is false. The blockade scares them even more than the bombing. They've been bombed for years, but the blockade they hate. The Washington Post reporting, even if the shipping lanes are open in the Strait, quote, it could take 6 months to fully clear the Strait of Hormuz of mines deployed by the Iranian military, and any such operation is unlikely to be carried out until the U.S. war with Iran ends, the Pentagon has informed Congress. A reminder, there's no go-around from the Persian Gulf. There's only one way in and out of the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. Military Central Command with an update on the blockade. U.S. forces have directed 31 vessels to turn around or return to port as part of the U.S. blockade against Iran. And President Trump posting very good news. I have just been informed that the 8 women protesters who are going to be executed tonight in Iran will no longer be killed. 4 will be released immediately. 4 will be sentenced to 1 month in prison. Here's more from Caroline Levitt yesterday with Martha.
Only President Trump could save the lives of these 8 beautiful Iranian women who he has received direct word from the Iranian regime, or what's left of it, that their lives are going to be spared. And that comes as a result of President Trump asking them directly not to kill these young, beautiful women who certainly deserve a chance to continue living their lives freely and peacefully. And now that will happen thanks to President Trump, because he's a humanitarian at heart.
And Iranian forces seized those 2 ships yesterday in the Strait of Hormuz after U.S. forces seized 2 Iranian oil tankers. It appears to be a tit for tat. Right now, there are no plans for Vice President J.D. Vance to fly to Islamabad to continue negotiating with Iran. The White House says they're waiting for a comprehensive Iranian counterproposal. So we wait, guys.
So just to be clear, Lucas, we picked up these ships far away from the Strait because we know we're beginning to unwind how Iran is getting their ghost ships in and out, and how they're trafficking their oil, right?
That's right. One of them was outside the Strait of Hormuz in the Gulf of Oman. The other one, Brian, you're right, was in the Indian Ocean, far from the Strait of Hormuz. That ship allegedly had left Karg Island with oil. It was a sanctioned vessel, but the U.S. monitored it, sent in the Navy SEALs to board the ship in the Indian Ocean. It was a sanctioned vessel with oil bound for Asia, Brian.
Yep, and maybe bound for China. So that's certainly going to affect them. Lucas, thanks so much. That's what Lindsey Graham put out last night.
I'm just going to interrupt them and just mention that the markets are open in New York and the S&P 500 is down. It's at 7,121. I have a target of 7,400 to 7,800 by year end, may even get to 8,000. VIX is trading at 19, so that's stable. The dollar is just slightly stronger against the euro at 1.169. And the USD Japanese yen is trading at 159.47. Bitcoin is trading at 77,760. And natural gas is trading at 2.648. Oil is trading at 93.90. So it's going to be tested in that 94 resistance level today. And watch for UCO. It's trading right now at 42.58. If oil passes the 94 barrier, I suspect that you're going to see like a 42.9, maybe even a 43 on UCO. If you like the content that I do, please help support the work by donating on my website. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or buy me a coffee. And make sure that you subscribe to all my channels to help spread the word.
Social media. He says this blockade is going to go global, and I think that's what he's referring to. They picked up this ship Tiffany, which was en route to China, full of oil. So how have they existed all these years? Because Joe Biden looked the other way and allowed them to take their sanctioned oil on unsanctioned ships. They turn off their transponders, and these ships will go to China in many cases, and they sell their oil. They get their money. It stays offline. A lot of the transactions are done in dollars. And now we're saying, we're stopping you here, and we also know what you're up to over there.
So the question is, Ainsley, does now the Chinese and other people that are considered allies of Iran start to put pressure on them to make a deal? And I think they have to. I mean, it's going to impact them all. Not only do we have full control of the strait, but we're controlling international waters at this point, and no one wants to go against our Navy.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because daily, the Institute for the Study of War, they're a nonpartisan, nonprofit public policy research organization, and they have public daily updates on what's happening. And their latest one have the report of the Iranian decision-making being fragmented and in disarray. And we've been hearing from our sources that the leadership there can't agree. So when our individuals go over to Pakistan and they meet with the Iranians, the leadership there can't agree. You've got the IRGC against, other.
And that's a sign of the power that the Shiite religion has over the common sense. And so there's going to be a civil war within Iran. There's going to be a religious civil war in Iran. The Shiites want control. They want to take this to the ultimate. They want to die for their cause. They're not going to negotiate in good faith. They're crazy, and the Sunnis know this. So if there's going to be some sort of more secular or more centrist government, the Shiites aren't going to allow it to happen because they want the Islamic Republic. The Islamic Republic is a theocracy, and there's going to need to be a civil war that takes place in that region. Now, this sounds right up the CIA alley. Find a way to overthrow the Islamic Republic and allow for the seculars to gain control and have a constitution and not be beholden to the Shiites. I'm just surprised it's taken so long for the CIA to get their act together with Iran.
Leaders that have been communicating with our team, and they can't even communicate with their supreme leader because he's in hiding and there's no communication. So they have to pass notes to get a decision from him.
Yeah, so you got the political leadership, the speaker, the president, and then you got the IRGC, which has the weapons. And it looks like the IRGC, because they have the weapons, and it doesn't seem like the supreme leader is functioning properly, they're operating with independence. Now, the former supreme leader set it up that way. He set it up that if he was killed and the government was killed, that the IRGC could break out in these little militias, essentially, and they could fire at will. So there's no one really checking them. So if you got the administration that's trying to go back and forth about a deal, but none of it really matters if you can't get the IRGC on board.
So you got Egypt, Turkey, as well as Pakistan trying to get both sides back to the table. Now, we would fly over there. We're not going to go 18 hours with our 3 people and go over there and deal with people. Number one, are they going to show up? Number two, if you do show up, can you make decisions? J.D. Vance said it was clear halfway through their 21-hour marathon meeting that the people they were meeting with weren't making final decisions, and they were arguing with each other in front of our guys. So the question is now, who's making that final decision? What you're referring to, Lawrence, is the mosaic military doctrine that they went through, which means 31 provinces act 31 different game plans in order to stay alive. They looked at what happened with Saddam Hussein being taken out in a matter of months, and they saw the headless Iraq government fall apart. And they said, okay, we got to redo how we do this, because sooner or later we're going to have to confront the U.S. too.
Well, I think one side is willing to come to the table, and they're willing to negotiate with some preconditions, like the U.S. has to lift its blockade before the talks. Not sure if the president would do that. Maybe he would, or maybe he would right after the talks, depending on what those talks are. And then the other side, you have this Ahmad Vahidi. He's the IRGC Commander Major General. He appears to have the upper hand, and he's the only senior official who maintains direct access to the supreme leader, and he relays those key decisions.
So meanwhile, the White House has this position. We'll let them figure it out. Iran needs to get a unified front. Until then, we'll continue to take control of the strait and strangle them from an economic standpoint. Here's Caroline Levitt.
We await their response, and we will see. The president has not set a firm deadline to receive an Iranian proposal, unlike some of the reporting I've seen today. Ultimately,
for the ones that are watching the telemetry on YouTube or on my website, market telemetry, oil is now trading at 94.35. So it broke the 94 barrier and it's approaching the retracement of 94.84. And UCO right now is trading at 72.76. If you've been paying attention to me and you did a little bit of pre-market trading, you would have made money in UCO.
Line will be dictated by the commander-in-chief and the president of the United States. The White House and our intelligence community certainly has a good understanding. However, we want to see a unified response and a unified proposal. To the previous question's point, you see a lot of different messaging on social media from many people within the regime, and a lot of that public nonsense is not what we hear from them privately. But again, we want a unified response, and that's what the president is awaiting.
Yeah, it's tough to deal when you don't know, you can't get them to show up, and if they do show up, they can't speak with one voice. So we kind of have an impasse now.
It's amazing. We've heard a lot about gas prices with what's happening there. It's affecting gas prices globally, and a lot of Americans are worried about it, but the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ closed at records. Look at that. 3 green arrows up dramatically.
Yeah, earnings are strong. Let's just take a look at what the gas prices look like right now. As of yesterday, just over $4. It was higher a week ago, and then a month ago it was $3.94, and then a year ago it was $3.17. Remember, on average, Joe Biden's per barrel was over $90. Right. We're getting close to the 70, and at 65 is when they don't want it to go any lower. That means you can't make any money in the oil business. But we're pumping like crazy. We're beginning to explore. We're trying to fill the gap. But right now, the American people are feeling the pinch in gas prices.
Yeah, they're saying in this new Fox News poll, when it comes to gas prices for your family, 60% say it's a major problem, 29% says it's a minor problem, and not a problem at all, 11%. You go back to September 25, Ainsley, a major problem, 33%, a minor problem, 43%, not a problem, 24%. I would just say, as I continue to say, this was the Iranians' goal, is to put pressure on the president when it comes to the gas prices, so he would alter course.
Right. Several things come to mind. I heard a report, a man was being interviewed. He's a farmer, and he has big tractors, and it's very expensive, obviously, to fill those up. Or if you're in the shipping business, it's very expensive to put gas in your boat. Those are the ones that it affects at a different level. But the other day, I was in Florida, and I'm driving. My daughter wanted Chick-fil-A or something, so I pulled into an intersection, and I saw all these people waiting for gas. I'm like, why this gas station? And I realized it's a BJ's, and I'm not a member of BJ's. Isn't that they have discounted gas, right? Mm-hmm. So people were willing to wait. I would imagine, based on this line, 30 minutes, 45 minutes to fill up their tanks to save a few bucks.
Meanwhile, the Treasury Secretary was asked yesterday on Capitol Hill, when are gas prices dropping? Here.
I can tell you that it is my belief that when we talk about gasoline, that the crude market is currently in what is known in the energy business a very steep backwardation, which means that the future prices are much lower than we are at present. I think the conflict will end. I think gasoline prices will come back to where they were or perhaps lower, as they did. Has shown that he is good at getting energy prices down, and that our energy dominance agenda has the lowered prices.
How fast will the prices of gasoline come down?
Again, that is path dependent on when the war and the conflict end.
Well, from a perspective of the Armed Services Committee, it's not likely to end soon.
Well, we don't know when it's going to end. And I would just say that if you look at the markets, even when there's talk about a deal being reached, you see the prices go down. Immediately, they go down. So just imagine once they finally do end the conflict. But I think it's important to note the president has been very clear. He's not going to allow this to be the issue that prevents him from getting a good deal and rushing into something. You don't want Obama 2.0. You know, you don't want the JCPOA that essentially emboldened Iran. So we'll see what happens.
And they unfroze a lot of their funds, and they arrived in dollars on pallets, and that's not what we want to do.
Right. Well, this is the problem that I have with Fox you know, I received this information from a book that I'm reading called The New Map by Daniel Yergin. He's a great historian about the oil markets. He's probably the guy to go to in terms of oil market history. And he has his own think tank and consulting company, but he is the guy to go to for anything dealing with oil. It's a great book. I think he published it in 2021, but it's talking about the new geopolitical map because of oil shale and fracking and natural gas that's coming from the fracking and how it's changing the whole scene here. And it's a fascinating book. But within that book, and he's talking about Iran, because he divides the book into regions. So the Middle Eastern region and about the Iranian sanctions that we had. There was oil that was confiscated and sold in the market and put into an escrow account. And also certain assets, overseas assets, were seized and put it into an account. What Obama did was that he didn't give American taxpayer money to Iran. They took the money from escrow accounts from the sanctions. So it's spun in the mainstream media, especially on Fox, not fully explaining that. Americans didn't give Iran new money. The Iranians were given back the money that they had through the sanctions. It was theirs, but it was confiscated, and then it was given back. So, but should they have been given the money back? No. Should they have been able to be on a glide path to nuclear weapons and allow them to build this shield of defense with these drones and missile systems? No. I mean, Obama failed. Obama failed because of that. Now, the failure accelerated when Trump pulled out of the agreement, the Obama agreement with the Iranians. But the fact is that they used the money to rearm. So it's not just the issue of them getting enrichment of uranium. It's also the shield that they were building to prevent the international community to take that capability away from them. And Rubio mentioned this at the very beginning of the war, that they thought that they were going to be able to hide behind this missile defense and drone defense system and continue on their nuclear ambitions. And that's unacceptable, especially when the country is run by crazy Shiites. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the vitamin C and magnesium. Vitamin C and magnesium will help with your skin, boost up your immune system, and also help with brain function. Magnesium is super important for brain function. Magnesium and zinc boosts up that immune system and helps with brain function. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the magnesium and zinc and the vitamin C and magnesium. In addition, magnesium also improves the efficacy of vitamin D3. Your vitamin D3 will work better for you when you take the magnesium. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. Let's listen into Bloomberg here.
Moves. Civilian Navy Secretary John Phelan was abruptly fired, although no official explanation.
Switch to Tasty Tray and earn a
building priorities. The Senate worked overnight in an attempt to reopen the Department of Homeland Security.
All right, what I'm going to do is apologize for that. I'm going to play this MS Now
Rally comes.
Steve Ratner is talking about tariffs and the effects on the economy.
To record highs yesterday after President Trump extended the ceasefire with Iran indefinitely. That rally comes as the stock market has remained mostly positive throughout Trump's second term, despite economic volatility around the war and the administration's sweeping so-called Liberation Day tariff hikes last year. Let's bring in former Treasury official, Morning Joe economic analyst Steve Ratner with charts on what is behind Wall Street's positivity. So, Steve, this can be very confusing to people who watch this economy. They see the jobs numbers, they see the huge inflation numbers as well. They see tariffs being placed on goods and services across this country. And yet the stock market continues to march upward. How does that work exactly?
Yeah, Willie, it's a mystery to a lot of people. And in some cases, even people who are professional investors on Wall Street did not predict this kind of surge. But we can take a look at graphically what's been going on. So Trump arrives. We have Liberation Day, which, as you mentioned, was a hit to the stock market. It went down pretty sharply, quite sharply. But then it just marched upward through the whole first year of Trump's term, into the second year, right up until the war began. And then it took another little, not so little, dive here. But then it's bounced right back to, as you say, to notching a whole series of all-time highs, which is really quite remarkable. Although when you put this in context, actually, for whatever set of reasons, the last several presidents have had a really good start to their terms in terms of the stock market. Here's Trump 2, all what you see up here, up 16.8% in his beginning of his second term. Slightly below, but very similar to his first term, actually. A bit above Biden, because Biden had to deal with COVID and rising interest rates and a few other things. But then you look at Obama, who came in right during the financial crisis, as we remember, up 49%, up 25%. So history would tell you the beginning of a president seems to go pretty well.
You know, what's interesting, though, Steve, is if you look back over the past 6 years, I guess maybe 4 years, as we were moving beyond COVID, Andrew Ross Sorkin and I always seem to have had the same conversation for the past 4 years, where we kept waiting for economic numbers to go down as interest rates continued to go up. And the macro numbers never did that. As inflation went up, the macro numbers stayed strong for the most part. Inflation went down, interest rates still up high. We kept talking about how resilient the economy was. Donald Trump comes in, all the threats about sort of radical tariff policies, and time again, the market has endured. It's moved forward despite that. As you go to your corporate earnings still being strong.
This dovetails into another book that I'm reading that's really important that you should get, all right? It's called The Real Reasons Economies Shrink and What to Do About It. And it's talking about recession by Dr. Goodspeed, all right? Now, he's an economic historian, not an economist, an economic historian, very similar to Niels Ferguson, all right? And even Niels Ferguson, who wrote The Ascent of Money, I read The Ascent of Money during the crisis. And I've read his book in 2009. And Neil states, it is rare that a work of economic history is truly revolutionary. Goodspeed's Recession is such a book. Now, this book, its main thesis, all right, in a nutshell, is all the econometrics out there that tries to predict a recession, all of the traders and the economic analysts with the fundamental models that they have cannot predict recessions. And that when you look at any economic data that may suggest that a recession is coming, there are a lot of false positives. And this basically means that our economy is in a chaotic flux, and that if enough variables go in a certain direction, the economy can do really well. If enough of the variables align a certain way, it could go in a negative direction. So it's more of a chaotic system. And so you can't look at it just by unemployment. You can't look at it just by inverted yield curve. You can't, because you can be in an inverted yield curve and not be in a recession. So the traditional economic models and what we were taught in business school and what we were taught in grad school, they don't have really good predictive power in when a recession is going to happen. It does have really good power in stating after the fact, but not before the fact. So this is why this is happening. Like, for example, just a couple of years ago, we kept on hearing that, especially when that Silicon Valley bank, the SVB, failed. We thought that there was going to be a recession. We thought that this was going to cause, some serious hiccup in the financial markets. When crypto started to implode, we thought that that may actually cause some consternation in the financial markets and in the banking sector. It didn't. So Goodspeed's thesis is holding, that you can't really predict a recession. It's really a black swan event. But it is guaranteed that it will happen. You just can't guarantee when it's going to happen, and nor can you guarantee the severity of it. It does seem that the severity of the recessions are based on good monetary policy. If good monetary policy is instituted during that downturn, then you can buffer the effects. If you pick the wrong monetary policy, you can amplify the effects of the recession. But the main thesis here is that you can't predict recessions. And so as you have more and more investors out there buying the dip and holding, buying the dip and holding, buying the dip and holding, that's actually keeping the market up. Now, there is such a thing as there's this Wall Street and there's Main Street. What's really happening in the economy versus what's really happening in the stock market. They are two different beasts, but they shadow each other back and forth. All right? So it's not a foregone conclusion that we're going to be going into recession because of energy price shock. Some other things have to happen. Now, I come from the educational background that it has a lot to do with new financial products coming into the market, new financial engineering coming into the market, exotic products, what is called exotic products, that eventually become mainstream. But they become mainstream and vanilla, what is called a vanilla product. So you take an exotic product that's brand new or something not used ubiquitously, and it starts being used in the economy, and there's more credit, and it gets too ahead of their skis, and eventually it brings down the market. That a credit cycle, has a big component to bringing down the market and having it to go into a recession. I still hold that belief. All right. But when these products end up bringing down the economy because of a credit cycle pullback, these products that used to be exotic end up becoming vanilla and sometimes even regulated. So is ETFs in private credit and private equity, one of these exotic instruments, financial instruments that need to be regulated, that will eventually become vanilla, maybe. And maybe there's some sort of credit cycle that's tied to it. But we're probably far from seeing it anytime soon. So it's a great book. So if you want to understand recessions from the perspective of chaos theory, this is the book for you. It goes against the grain of a lot of the economists out there thinking that they can predict the market or predict the recession, I should say. And the key is that when you look at all these different indicators, there's a lot of false positives. And just by trading the last 5 years, you can sense that there's been a lot of false positives. A lot of the economists out there thought we were going to go into recession because of tariffs. Didn't happen. A lot of people thought we were going to go into recession because of the oil shock. It didn't happen. A lot of people thought that we may be going into recession because of the overspending during COVID. Didn't happen. A lot of people thought we were going to go into recession because of some of the failed banks and the lending that was taking place, especially on the West Coast. Didn't happen. So I think there's something to be learned from reading this book. So I highly recommend it. It's by Goodspeed. It's his latest book. I did meet him, and he's bringing a new light on a subject that a lot of experts thought that they had a hold on with using econometrics, and the econometric models just don't have strong predictive power in terms of predicting recessions. All right, so we'll continue with Ratner's chart here. But that's the answer to Joe's question to Ratner.
Try to square that, not only what we've seen over the past year and a half with Donald Trump, but also what we saw the last couple of years with Joe Biden, how despite rising interest rates, despite inflation, and now despite tariffs, despite a stubborn 3.3% inflation rate, even now, corporate earnings still stay high in a very volatile economy.
Yeah, that's exactly remarkable. And so thanks for the lead into this chart. But as you can see here, to make your point, Joe, look how strong corporate earnings have been. And you can go back to 2024 when Biden was still president. They were going up. But then toward the end of 24, the rate of growth of earnings accelerated all through 25. And now the analysts are projecting that earnings will accelerate even more in 26 up to these high levels. And if you looked at a chart of the progression of these earnings estimates, you see that analysts are getting more and more bullish. They're actually raising their estimates of corporate earnings. So why is this happening? It's happening for a number of reasons. One of them is AI, which I'm going to talk about right down there in a second. But also companies are tightening their belts. The weak job market that you mentioned is a function of companies really trying to slim down their workforces, get leaner and meaner, and be ready. You had the One Big Beautiful Bill, which provided some tax relief to companies, and that obviously helps corporate earnings. And you have a reasonably strong economy, in part because of AI. And so if you look down here, you can see this is just one proxy, one example of what's going on in the AI world. These are capital expenditures by the so-called hyperscalers, the Amazon, Google, Microsofts of the world. And you can see back in 2020, they were spending about $80 billion. Now they're spending $675 billion, 8.4 times increase in 6 years. And all of this filters through the economy in just more spending. They go out and they buy data centers, or they commission data centers. People have to go and build them, creates jobs, it creates profits for the companies that build them.
But there are podcasters out there that have been following this, and they have mentioned that the actual server sites are not as plentiful as they've been stating to their investors. They're saying that they're going to build these server centers, and it's either on the drawing board, or when they're purchasing equipment, it's going into storage. Maybe they just poured the foundation and that's it. So what's actually being built right now is only a fraction of what they've been saying they've been building. So how much is really happening in terms of CapEx versus planned at CapEx?
All that filters back up here. So you've got a combination of tight management by companies, a reasonably strong U.S. economy, the tax relief they got, and the AI boom. And the AI boom is also helping corporate profits because companies are reporting pretty regularly that they're using more AI, and that's making them more efficient. Obviously, we get into the whole question of jobs.
I do not believe that there is a material gain in efficiency because of AI, unless you're a help center. And instead of sending your calls to India, you now have a chat bot. No, I totally disagree. Totally disagree. If any efficiency is happening, it's at the margins at the moment.
But for the moment anyway, AI has been a boon to corporate profits.
Well, I was going to say, all the things you're talking about, whether you're talking about the Trump tax cuts for corporations, if you're talking about AI, you talk about the belt tightening, which is making corporate profits go up. All of that good news for corporations, most of that really bad news for working Americans. So there are real winners and losers in this economy, aren't there?
Well, as a matter of fact, we have a chart on winners and losers. So we can start with winners and losers among the different industries because not all industries have participated equally in those profits that I showed you there before or in their stock market performance, which I will show you here. So if you look at a category which we call consumer staples, this is Walmart, this is Procter & Gamble, this is things people buy just as everyday needs. Those stocks were doing quite well before the war. Since the war, they're down. Why are they down? Because gasoline prices are high and all energy costs are going up. And so the expectation is consumers are going to have to cut back on their spending on these kinds of items. Airlines, probably pretty obvious, higher fuel costs, not good for airlines. Utilities, similarly. Materials are companies that use a lot of commodities, and commodity prices generally have been going up because of this inflationary situation. And then you have the Magnificent Seven, the technology companies that we talk about, again, the Amazon, Google, Microsofts of the world. They actually had a tough first quarter because Trump put tariffs on them, and you had what was called the DeepSeek moment when it looked like China was going to be successful in AI. But then post the war, coincidentally, all those pressures came off, they're up. And then, of course, oil, you'd expect, they were up before, but oil companies have been up substantially since the war began. So those are winners and losers on the company side. But to get to your point, Joe, you can look at individuals, and you can see that actually individuals for the past year or so have done, on average, and you obviously have a lot of income inequality, I don't want to minimize that, but on average, earnings were running slightly above inflation. So people were getting a little more purchasing power on average. But what happened when the war started, as you pointed out, was inflation goes up, wages actually were drifting, wage increases were drifting down. And so as we sit here today, consumers are really getting no benefit from this economy. They're essentially staying flat at best in terms of their purchasing power.
And this is the reason why I do the show. Instead of being a victim, I'm telling you on how to benefit from this. The wage earner, the slave that's working for corporate, all right? Right now, because of the war, because of inflation going up, you only have approximately 0.2% increase in your purchasing power, 0.2%, while the spread was usually about maybe 1%. You only have 0.2% of purchasing power increase relative to inflation. But if you listen to me and you buy in actively the market and you make money, you're going to be able to offset that and maybe even do better. So you're not a victim of inflation. So stop being a victim. Stop whining about it. You can manage this for your family. But you have to listen, be patient, and not be fearful of market moves. I mean, literally, if you bought when the S&P 500 was trading at 6,500, which was only 6 weeks ago, all right? and you sold today, let's say let's do an experiment here. So 7,124 is what the S&P 500 is trading at right now. And you bought at 6,500 when the war started. That's a gain of 624. All right. That ends up being approximately a 9.6% gain. So if you threw in, let's just say $5,000 in that, you would have gained $480. All right. So the point that I'm making here is that for every 5,000 you put in, there's another $480 that you made in 6 weeks. So if you put in, let's say $15,000, then you're talking about, over $1,000 increase. So the point that I'm making here is that by doing this periodically throughout the year, you'll be able to mitigate the inflation. And so what you basically did was usually when there's inflation, usually the stock market goes up because people aren't going to go into bonds. They have money, so where are they going to go? Because it doesn't make any sense for them to buy bonds when there's inflation. So where are they going to go? It's going to go to stocks. So it's going to go up. This is the reason why rich people get richer and poor people get poorer.
And so when you look at the polls that you guys have been talking about so much over the last few days about Trump's handling of this and that, the economy, the war, and so forth, this has certainly got to have an impact on people's perception of his handling of the economy. They're seeing higher gas prices, well over $4, and they're not seeing their paychecks going up by nearly that much at the moment.
And oil this morning back over $100 a barrel. So those gas prices aren't coming down anytime soon. We'll see. Morning Joe economic analyst.
They didn't
Steve
tell you on
Reiner.
how to solve the problem. They'll just tell you, see, my whole show is about how to solve problems. I'm showing you how to solve the inflationary problem and help your family out. I'm also telling you how to improve your health. A lot of these shows, they tell you, oh, diabetes is up and blah, 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 or this medication is, is new and FDA approved and blah, blah, blah. Don't go down that road. You don't need to. You don't have to. You can take charge of your life and be healthy. You can take charge of your life and be a master of your own destiny and not a slave to someone else. Because if you work for someone, guess what? You're a slave. Just a modern day slave. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the omega-3. Omega-3 will help to bring down systemic inflammation and control your lipid profile. Super important. Why? Because it helps to bring down LDL levels and increase your HDL levels. And when you do that, you're reducing plaque formation. By reducing the concentration of oxidized LDL, you reduce plaque formation. And you stack that with a lot of other stuff like C60, vitamin D3, K2, turmeric, ashwagandha, nattokinase. You stack those together, you'll be able to actually bring down the actual blockage, reduce the blockage over time. It takes about a year to a year and a half with proper diet and exercise. So you can pay attention to me or you can go down the road of cardiovascular disease. It's up to you. Please go to my store and get the Myotrol. Myotrol will help to build muscle. When you get older, once you hit about age 40, males and females have a hard time building muscle. You start losing muscle. It's called atrophy. This will help to prevent that. This Myotrol will help you to build muscle. Do a little bit of resistance training. Take the Myotrol and help with the gene expression to build the muscle and to maintain that muscle. In addition, with better musculature, you're improving your brain function because you're building up higher concentrations of myokines and BDNF, which are neuroprotective. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. And this stack that I'm going to tell you here is really good for your brain, for your cardiovascular health, and also your immune system. Turmeric. This will bring down inflammation and soak up free radicals. Lignans. This will help to soak up free radicals, bring down inflammation. It's great for your immune system and your endocrine system. And ashwagandha root brings down cortisol levels and helps you to control your blood glucose levels. When you stack these together, it's a very powerful stack to help with brain function, help to reduce plaque formation, and to boost up that immune system. And when you do that every day, you're slowing down the aging process. Now, do you want to invest in your body? Or do you want to be dependent on pharmacopoeia that will literally end up hurting you in the long run because of side effects and problems and a downward spiral? People that are on heart medication, they may be able to stabilize them in terms of, let's say, their lipid profile or contractibility of the heart, but eventually over time, it gets worse. You got to up the dosage. And eventually the patient has more side effects. And eventually it's a slow decline of heart failure. Or do you want to do some cardio, do some resistance training, and make sure that your arteries are clear? It's up to you. Most people that have cardiovascular disease is because it's self-induced, not because of some sort of genetic issue or formation issue during birth, congenital. Most cardiovascular disease is self-induced. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and take charge of your life and stop whining about how your situation is. When you can take charge of it, you can improve your health. You can improve your finances by not being a victim of what's happening. Do you think rich people are saying they're victims? No. They look at the situation and they say, how do they benefit from it? You need to start thinking that way. If you don't, you're going to be shit out of luck on the continent of the poor. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, let's listen to John Bolton talking about the ceasefire.
Finance the old way. Finance the ramp way.
Iran now says it has collected its first toll in the Strait of Hormuz. It also released new video purportedly showing Iranian soldiers boarding container ships there. The White House says this does not violate the ceasefire because they are not U.S. or Israeli ships. I want to play an exchange, or one part of an exchange, and I want to read you something else. And this has to do with Iran apparently boarding and seizing, taking possession of vessels in or near the Strait of Hormuz. This is how the White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt explained it.
Does the president view that as a violation of the ceasefire?
No, because these were not U.S. ships. These were not Israeli ships. These were two international vessels. And for the American media, who is sort of blowing this out of proportion to discredit the president's facts that he has completely obliterated Iran's conventional navy, these two ships were taken by speedy gunboats. Iran has gone from having the most lethal navy in the Middle East to now acting like a bunch of pirates. They don't have control over the strait.
So she said, talking about it as blowing it out of proportion, but it was President Trump in a Truth Social not too long ago who said any Iranian who fires on us or at peaceful vessels will be blown to hell. So is it blowing it out of proportion or is it blown to hell? Which one do you think it is, Ambassador?
Well, look, I think her comment was utterly incoherent. Not that I expect anything any different. I mean, what if those ships were Saudi, or what if they were Emirati or Kuwaiti or British or German? I mean, who knows really what the ship, where the ships were flagged? But the real point is, if you're going to have a ceasefire, that is not the kind of conduct we expect from the adversary. Now, Trump has also kept our blockade in place, and in fact, I think quite correctly, extended it to a worldwide basis, which means the ceasefire itself is incoherent. And I'm afraid that's also a pretty good description at the moment of the direction of U.S. policy. I think the president's lost. I don't think he knows what to do next.
Who has the leverage in negotiations as the president extended this ceasefire now a couple more days? Who do you think has the leverage, and who do you think Iran thinks has the leverage?
Well, I think perhaps most importantly, Iran clearly thinks it has the leverage. I wouldn't have started the ceasefire. The country that benefits from the ceasefire is Iran. They have been getting pounded, and now they've had 2 to 3 weeks of relief from it, and the prospect of more in store if negotiations get started. The leverage comes because of U.S. and Israeli military force, and stopping the application of that force has really given the Iranians a chance to try and make something out of a very bad situation for them.
You mentioned the U.S. blockade of Iranian ports and the seizure of Iranian vessels and vessels that have been at ports all around the world. How much pressure do you think that puts on the Iranians? How long can they hold out against this type of blockade?
Well, I think it puts enormous pressure on, but I think in addition to that, and it's one reason I wouldn't have had the ceasefire, we've got to make the rest of the Strait, the rest of the Persian Gulf, safe for traffic from oil from the Gulf Arab countries. In other words, stop Iran from exporting oil, but let our friends in the Gulf Arab states, export oil to alleviate the global economic effects that the conflict is having. I think if we try to get out of this without having demonstrated military dominance over the Strait of Hormuz, the Iranian regime is going to use this like a light switch. They're going to turn the Strait of Hormuz off and on when it suits them. And if we weren't willing to use military force to open the strait now, when are we ever going to be willing to use it?
When it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, the IRGC releasing video around the seizure of 2 vessels yesterday, and it's pretty dramatic video. I mean, there's a lot of questions around whether this is valid footage. It looks more like, some kind of practice round. Some naval experts telling us that this might not actually be the seizure, but it gives you an idea of how they're doing it because it's asymmetrical. You've got these speedboats that are going up towards these vessels. I mean, these guys are armed. These speedboats can carry around a dozen IRGC commanders. And the analysis also shows us that while these speedboats, are very small and they can't really face up to the U.S. Navy, if they come in swarms or even in hundreds, then you're looking at potential significant damage. And according to CNN sources, there could be hundreds and even thousands of these speedboats, even though the United States maintains that it has been able to annihilate the entire Iranian Navy.
Joining me right now to talk about this is CNN Global Affairs analyst Brett McGurk. Brett, let's talk first, I guess, about this latest directive from the president, who says he's ordered the Navy to shoot and kill any boat, no matter how small they are, apparently, putting mines in the Strait of Hormuz. Was that already happening? Isn't that why? Didn't they go and already attack some of the Iranian Navy that was allegedly putting mines in the water?
We did. We've been told we sunk the entire Iranian Navy. But Kate, this is now a story of 2 blockades and a competition for who can stretch time. So let me kind of unpack that. We have a blockade on Iranian ports, and Iran has a blockade on the world. So we have a blockade on Iran. Iran has a blockade on the world. And right now, nothing is really getting through the strait unless Iranian ships can squirt through our blockade, or the U.S. military and CENTCOM wants to eventually create confidence for international shipping to go through the international passageway, which Iran has mined and has threatened to attack. That's basically where we are. And it's a competition for who can outlast the other side. The economic pressure will build on Iran, but the economic pressure will build on the global economy, and particularly countries in Asia, South Korea, Japan, and China. That's basically where we are. And in the backdrop, you have the Pakistanis still trying to get talks moving again, and we'll see if that happens. So I would put the president's new statement here against that backdrop, because right now we're kind of stuck. The Iranians are making clear with the videos they put out yesterday, Kate, showing their forces fast roping or climbing a ladder onto a ship. They've done that before. I was the point person in the White House on this issue with Iran. They did this 3 times in the Biden administration. They seized a ship, after we seized the ship, and they put out a video just like that. This is what the Revolutionary Guards have done for some time. The fact that they can still do it, though, after 6 weeks of a very intensive military conflict, I think is concerning. So that's the backdrop, and I think the president issued this somewhat threatening statement today, which is about that part of the CENTCOM mission to reopen that international passageway, which even in the best case, Kate, is going to take a long time. These are vast territory. Finding mines is very hard. We decommissioned a lot of our mine clearing ships just before this war started, actually. So even the assets aren't necessarily in place. It's going to take time.
I mean, here, I'll give you a choose your own adventure. What do you think is the more pressing issue to answer, which is who can outlast whom and who benefits the longer this drags on? Or also, when you hear, speaking of timing, this assessment that CNN has reported and others, this assessment that lawmakers were told by Pentagon briefers that they could take up to 6 months to fully clear the Strait of Hormuz after the war ends because of the mines, which is a more pressing issue to figure out how to fix.
Well, so, we are in the process of finding alternative routes for energy. Maybe about half of what used to go through the Strait is now going through other routes, such as through the Red Sea. There's a pipeline in Saudi Arabia. The UAE has a port called Fujairah, which kind of bypasses the Strait. But that's not really enough. We're increasing our production. But this is going to have an impact on the global economy. But as I mentioned, Kate, primarily those countries that are so dependent upon these exports out of the Strait, and that's China, Japan, South Korea. And I mean, if I was in the White House, I'd be calling those capitals to say, hey, you want this problem fixed? Get on the phone with Tehran, tell them to do the deal that's on the table. That's how we can get out of this, build that international pressure on Iran. I don't really see that happening right now, unfortunately. But I've said this since I think we were first talking early in this war. This is going to be a long-term, protracted campaign, whether you like it or not. If you take something on like this, it's not going to be short. I don't think that the American people have not been prepared for that. And we're now in the 6th or 7th week. I think it's going to go on for some time. Hopefully not the hot war shooting phase that we've seen, but this economic warfare, that's the new normal. And it's similar to the old normal because we've been doing this with Iran for a long time, but kind of to an extreme degree because now it's the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has shut down other passageways, the Red Sea, the Bab el-Mandeb earlier, a couple years ago. The Strait of Hormuz, a whole different story, affects the entire world. And we're all going to be living with it for some time. But Iran is also going to come under pressure from our blockade. And that's basically where we are.
Yesterday, Hamid Reza, around this time, we saw Iran fire on at least 3 ships in around the Strait of Hormuz, those critical waterways there, and seize 2 of them to draw them in towards the Iranian coast. Do you expect to see more of this?
Well, it is sort of
all right, let's take a look at some other news here that's breaking. IBM CEO is thinking in 2029 that they see quantum used at scale. That's a little scary. Now, Pete Hegseth fired the Navy Secretary John Phelan. Let's listen into a little bit more detail about that.
They put the plate down like it's a piece of art. They make me feel that way.
Imagine being able to build an app with your name on it just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44, a complete.
Meanwhile, as John just mentioned, Navy Secretary John Phelan was fired yesterday. The Wall Street Journal reports Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth dismissed Phelan in a phone call just minutes before posting on social media, according to a person with knowledge of the discussions. And after Phelan had spent the day on Capitol Hill talking to lawmakers about the Navy's budget requests. According to the paper, Pentagon officials told congressional aides Hegseth fired Phelan because he and Deputy Defense Secretary Steve Feinberg felt the Navy Secretary was not moving quickly enough on President Trump's shipbuilding priorities. The Journal reports Phelan's close relationship with President Trump was a cause of tension with Hegseth and Feinberg, and that Hegseth was upset when Phelan pitched the idea for a modern battleship directly to the president last fall, bypassing the defense secretary. Hung Cao, the Navy undersecretary, a former Senate candidate, is now serving as acting Navy secretary. The latest firing comes just 2 weeks after Hegseth ousted the Army's chief of staff, General Randy George. Hegseth has fired dozens of top generals, admirals, other defense leaders since taking office last year. So, David French, Mr. Phelan, first of all, was just a huge donor to President Trump's campaign in 2024 and was given this position because of that. But that to the side, it again appears to be Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's feelings that he was upset that Phelan had a close relationship with the president, had gone around him on some of the decisions, cost him his job here.
Yeah, you know, what we're seeing is an enormous amount of instability now at the top of the military as Hegseth is going through and cleaning house, often firing generals with zero explanation, no real understanding, at least from the outside looking in, as to why this is happening. He's doing it during a time of war. So it's very clear you've got some sort of purge going on.
First of all, most wars have staff, especially the generals, being relieved. It happened during the Lincoln administration. It happened during World War II. It happened during Korea. It happened during the Vietnam War. This BS that people don't get fired during a war is ridiculous. Secondly, there has been a ossification of the Pentagon, and things needed to be retooled, reorganized to be a leaner, meaner fighting machine. What's wrong with that? Don't we want our tax dollars to be more effective? Why do we need all these generals when we lose in Afghanistan and Iraq? You know, I mean, come on. And most of them were out of shape. And there is such a thing as the brass over at the Pentagon not listening to the president. There are many documentaries out there about this very subject matter with the JFK administration, where the Pentagon didn't want to listen to JFK and what he wanted. They thought they knew better. In addition, you had people that were working at the State Department that weren't doing what the president wanted during JFK's administration. So there is this deep state that needs to be checked. So there is historical precedence on getting rid of your generals during a war. I mean, get real. And it's not out of the realm of normal processes to have a secretary of the Navy or of the Army or of, you know, even the defense secretary, or the Secretary of War now, being a more of a political position than a military position. Now, there have been people that were Secretary of Defense that had a long lineage of military service, but it doesn't have to be.
The Pentagon, it is very far from clear that this purge is related at all to the sort of the underlying merits of the leadership of the generals and admirals and others who've been fired. This is a dangerous thing, really, creating this kind of instability, creating a perception that you've got a lot of ideological and just pure raw political infighting at the top of the Pentagon. This is where the Pentagon is the place where politics.
And I have a hard time believing that Hegseth just fired Phelan without the wink by Trump. Of course, Trump approved it. Oh.
Is supposed to be really, truly left at the edge, on the outside of the building, because these people are the warriors who are defending our country through administration after administration after administration. And I'm very worried that what this instability is going to do over the long term.
You know, I'm curious, Jonathan Lemire, the president has now sort of broken that this Second Amendment ban on getting rid of people. We just saw the third person in his cabinet fired. Pete Hegseth's name had been mentioned at the end of next year. They might be trying to move him along. What strikes me is Donald Trump has to know that Pete Hegseth has looked erratic at running the Pentagon, for God's sake. He's looked erratic. He's looked extraordinarily immature. He's looked paranoid. It's a very bad look for the administration. It's even a very bad look when Donald Trump is standing next to Pete Hegseth at press conferences. It diminishes if you have the President of the United States, Commander-in-Chief, and you have General Kane, and then you have this childlike, erratic, paranoid carnival barker in the middle of the two of these people. I mean, the Iranians have to take great comfort in seeing Pete Hegseth behind a microphone. So I'm just curious. Have you heard any more talk about?
Is Morning Joe even on Team America?
The administration moving this person along that's caused so much damage inside the Pentagon, and who has not been liked by those close to the president from the very beginning, from the transition, because he lied continually to Susie Wiles and everybody else in the transition.
Yeah, a few things here. First of all, that point is exactly right. Susie Wiles and others in Trump's orbit have been deeply skeptical of Hegseth since the transition because he wasn't honest about some of the stuff in his background that then came out during public vetting. They thought that was a real own goal, if you will. In the first year of this second term, Trump did have that no scalps policy that they bandied about proudly, that there wasn't going to be the turnover like it was in his first term. That has now changed.
See, what it is that you have people that are pissed off at the Pentagon, pissed off at the State Department, pissed off in the deep state on how Trump is doing things. And what they do is that they start feeding to the mainstream media like MS Now or CNN, and they want to create an infighting or the perception of infighting or instability or incompetence to try to move the ball where maybe Pete Hegseth is removed from office because he's so incompetent or whatever. But what it really is it's the deep state being cleaned out and complaining about it to mainstream media, and they're just the sounding, they're just reverberating that animosity from the ones that are affected by cleaning house. Well, you know, the thing is that there is such a thing as a government that is not being effective, and we need to fix it. What's wrong with that?
We've had 3 cabinet members go, and there are rumors that more could follow. Those that I hear most of all who are on the thinnest ice include Tulsi Gabbard, include Kash Patel, and do include Pete Hegseth. But the Hegseth one always comes with a caveat that even Trump, who was, yes, very mindful of optics, of course, wouldn't want to fire his defense secretary during a war. Now, I think that when this conflict resolves itself, now that's an open question as to when that will happen, that could be Hegseth's, sort of starts being steered towards the door. But Trump, I am told, still likes Hegseth in terms of his performance on TV. He likes those very combative news conferences that we have seen at the Pentagon a number of times now, including when he calls the press Pharisees a few days ago. And Hegseth he likes that. And Hegseth, but you're right.
He looks like, Hegseth looks like an idiot for leaders.
See, this is the intelligentsia saying that Trump's staff is just an idiot. They're not part of our team. They're not part of the intelligentsia. They're not part of the paper belt. Yeah. Morning Joe knows better.
Across the world, they look at him as a joke. That weakens Donald Trump. Just like I was saying time and time again. that Kristi Noem would hurt Donald Trump's approval ratings on immigration. I said it repeatedly. You can go back and pull the tape. I said it repeatedly that if he kept Kristi Noem, she would hurt his numbers on immigration. And it has. Pete Hegseth, I'm saying it now, Pete Hegseth in that position is hurting Donald Trump on foreign policy issues, on this war, on the confidence that the Americans have.
Pete Hegseth has actually rebooted our military. It's been gutted by these, liberal policies. And I think Pete Hegseth is doing an excellent job. He's doing exactly what he needs to do, and he needs to clean house. And of course, there are going to be people that are upset about it.
And the commander-in-chief, I just don't understand. It's not hard to see that on TV.
Yeah, but job number one for a Trump cabinet official is to fight for the president on television. At least so far, Trump is okay with how Hegseth is doing this. But you're right about the culture of the Pentagon, too. I mean, not only I'm told by people who have been there for decades, it's a building now rife with paranoia, uncertainty, because there's been so many purges. Your top people, highly respected officers, have been pushed out. We've had now the Secretary of the Army and the Secretary of the Navy head out. I mean, there is an extraordinary amount of uncertainty there at the worst possible time, Willie. Of course, as the DOD, is still trying to prosecute this war.
How's that any different than in corporate, when there's a big restructuring because of a new CEO, or there's some downturn in the economy and all the executive staff is all worried about their job? It's no different.
With Iran. So there are certainly Republicans, I am told, who would like to see Hegseth be shown the door, but I don't think that's imminent.
Okay. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the digestive enzyme complex. This is going to help to reduce the load on your pancreas, help you to digest your food, your carbohydrates, your proteins, your lipids. You'll be able to absorb the nutrients better. Please go to my store and get the digestive enzyme complex. Super important to improve the health of your pancreas. Why? Because you don't want to be a Steve Jobs. Trust me. Dying from pancreatic cancer is really bad. Now, the digestive enzyme complex can be stacked with the probiotics, right? Now, these probiotics, you can get it in the VeggieCap version or the powdered version. I prefer taking the powdered version because I take all these different powders for my lunch, like the collagen and the gladiator barley, the boomer boost, the probiotics, the lignans. So by taking the probiotics that I have on my store, what it'll do is improve your gut biome. You're going to be able to sleep better. You're going to be able to consolidate your memory. You're going to be able to detoxify your central nervous system by having a good gut biome, because you're going to be getting in a better sleep pattern. You'll be able to get into deep sleep and REM sleep more often with a better gut biome. Your skin will improve. Your metabolism will improve. You'll reduce allergies, and your immune system at the gut level will improve. So taking a good probiotic is super important as a foundation to improve your health. This stacks really well with the multivitamin that I have on my store, which is easy to digest. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the probiotics, either in the VeggieCap form or the powdered form, and stack it with the digestive enzyme complex when you eat. You take it when you eat, and it'll help you to digest the carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids and reduce the load on your pancreas. So that is a great stack to improve your digestive health. So please go to my store. If you use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description of this video and all my videos. All right. It looks like Tesla is going to be investing a little bit more in AI. Now, the S&P 500 is trading at 7,130. VIX is still at 19, very stable. Oil is trading at 93.63. And that ETF that I've been watching That's 3 times leverage for oil, is trading at 42.75. If oil breaks again 90, it looks like it's going to try to break 94 again, maybe later today. If it does, then we should see UCO testing the 43 resistance level. Alrighty. Victor Hansen just came up with a new video, From Superpower to Self-Sabotage, the real threat to American greatness. Let's listen into that.
Navan, the #1 rated business travel platform, lets your team book work travel in one place. Flights, hotels, cars.
Hello, this is Victor Davis Hansen for the Daily Signal. This year on July 4th will be the 250th anniversary of the founding of the United States, as exemplified in the ratification signing of the Declaration of Independence. A lot of people ask ourselves, why are we so exceptional? Are we exceptional, or is this just American braggadocio? Well, if you look at some major indicators, it's pretty clear that America stands like a colossus over the world today. Look at the economy. The U.S. economy is roughly $30 trillion nominal economy in goods and services. It's 1/3 larger than the Chinese economy. We hear a lot about ascendant China, but it essentially means that one American is producing as many goods and services as his 4 Chinese counterparts. It's 1/3 bigger than the EU, which has about 70 million more people than the United States. If you look at its culture, if you look at Netflix, streaming, entertainment, Hollywood, even in its decline, popular music, it accounts for about 75% of international box office receipts of all sorts. Educationally, there's a lot of global indices, and they usually have the United States with 8 to 9 out of the top 10 universities. That kind of mimics the same economic standards that show that of the top 10 companies in terms of international market capitalization, I think 8 of them now are American. In the case of the educational surveys, it's usually Caltech, MIT, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, etc. in the top 10. But of the top 50, 40 of them are American. If you look at politics, the U.S. Constitution is the oldest surviving blueprint for a democracy-republic. All the others have either faded or they come in and out of existence. But ours is that continuity of one particular consensual government, and its foundational document is unprecedented. Finally, militarily, we have about 13,000 combat aircraft and their logistical support craft. That's larger than China, the EU, and India put together. We have 11 fleet carrier groups. China is struggling to get a third. No other country has a fleet-sized carrier and a carrier group. They have smaller carriers, but then in addition to our 11, we have 9 amphibious carriers that are about the same size as most other countries' fleet carriers. And we spend more money than most of the world combined in terms of defense budgetary. Why did we enjoy all of this preeminence? Is it just because we have a continental-sized country? Well, actually, Russia, then China, then Canada have larger territories than we do. Many countries have 2 oceans that border them. So it wasn't just that we have a large area and we have natural resources. Other countries have as many or more than we do. There has to be a secret that explains this global preeminence. And one of them, as I mentioned, is the Constitution. No other country has been able to emulate successfully our Constitution. It's a very rare document. it assumes that power will be collected in one particular person or one particular area given human nature, and therefore it's going to check the accumulation of inordinate power through the legislative, executive, and judicial branches as being separate, each with power over the other to stop their aggrandizement of authority and power. It has a Bill of Rights. Very few countries have a Bill of Rights that protect individual liberty against the state, which is outlined in the Constitution proper, the state's authority, and then the Bill of Rights refines or hones that in and gives precedence to the individual.
Well, I'm going to be a little bit more comprehensive about why America is exceptional. All right. This came out with a concept by Neil Ferguson a while back. This was in his book in 2011 about civilization, the West and the rest. And he also did a TED talk about it. And it's about the 6 killer apps. All right. At this time, everyone was talking about apps because of the iPhone. Well, what are the 6 killer apps for American exceptionalism? Competition, political and economic, science, so the science revolution, property rights, which is tied to the Enlightenment, modern medicine, consumer society, or a consumption society, and worth ethic. Now, if we lose any of those apps, those killer apps in our society, we will no longer be a great power. So it's competition, science, property rights, modern medicine, and consumer society, a mass market. Now, what's happening in New York? The erosion of property rights. So that's one of the killer apps that are being eroded. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people that are losing in their education scientific principles. In science, killer app, it involves the scientific method. So understanding that you have to get empirical information and understand that maybe certain things are random, maybe certain things are not random. So there's a scientific method, empirical inquiry, application to technology and military power. But if you erode that because of poor education, one of your apps start to not function as well. Modern medicine, in terms of the killer app, advances in public health, sanitation, epidemiology, and the dramatically increased life expectancies because of the use of modern medicine. But if people are starting to not get educated or not take charge of their health, one of the killer apps starts to go away. Worth ethic. If people start feeling as though they're no longer needing to contribute to society, that's another killer app that dies. So when you take a look at this, these 6 killer apps that make America exceptional: competition, science, property rights, modern medicine, consumer society, and worth ethic. If they're eroded by socialism or communism, we'll no longer have a great country. Now, what's happening in New York? If people feel as though the government is going to pay for you to just be lazy, the worth ethic goes down. And when the worth ethic goes down, then, you know, you feel as though you don't need to do anything. You don't need to go to school, learn, and build businesses. So scientific endeavor starts to decline. The consumer society starts to decline because there's not a desire to be an entrepreneur. And so the society starts to fall. So that's what makes America exceptional, those 6 killer apps.
In terms of free expression, the sanctity of his home from search and seizure, freedom of religion, the right to bear arms, etc. In addition to the Constitution, the United States is not founded on a class system. There are no dukes or earls. Where you're born, who your parents were, how much land your grandfather had, that doesn't really matter very much, or at least as much as talent. We are a meritocratic society, and we value someone, I suppose, based on their net worth more than we do their title. That sounds kind of plutocratic, but actually our system of rewarding individual success is measured by materialism or good works or philanthropy is a much more effective barometer of talent than is inherited privilege. And so that lends a message to the people that anybody can make it in America in a way impossible in many of the European countries and, of course, elsewhere in the world. We have, until recently, had a long tradition of the melting pot, meritocratic immigration. And that meant that if you came legally and immigrants were diverse, and they were of numbers of a size that could be acculturated, assimilated, and integrated, then it was a wonderful thing. I mentioned the 8 or 9 companies in the top 10 by market capitalization. I should say that of those American 8 or 9 countries, 4 of them were founded by immigrants. So it's been a great boom in the United States. And finally, we have a can-do individual culture. There's 2 types of envy in the world, the envy of emulation, the good envy, and the bad envy of anger or resentment that someone has more than you do. The old morality tale that American sees a Cadillac and asks somebody how he got it rather than kicks in the tires or keys it like someone else in another country would do in anger that someone has a nicer car than he does. But that does explain, encapsulate the American ethos of emulating people who are successful rather than trying to tear them down. We also are the largest really devout Western country in terms of the Judeo-Christian tradition. That offers a break to the appetites. When you have leisure and affluence that are the bounties of market capitalism and constitutional government, you can get decadent, you can get complacent. In other words, our religious tradition, maybe emblemized by the Sermon on the Mount, says just because something is legal and just because somebody has the ability to do it, you should not necessarily do it because of moral and ethical consideration. Are there dangers to this great American experiment of 250 years? Absolutely. An affluent and leisured society, unless it has familial or religious or community breaks upon the appetites, can become self-indulgent, lethargic, the lotus eater syndrome, and fall into a slow decline. We've seen that happen in Europe. The foundation of the Western tradition that is really descendant now in terms of economics, politics, culture, and its military. Another great worry is the fertility. The United States fertility rate has fallen just in 30 years from 2.1, the replacement rate, down to 1.6, as if life is too valuable, too fun, too enjoyable to waste it raising kids. Any society that has a low fertility rate, the population ages, it shrinks, and it becomes risk adverse. We also owe $30 trillion in aggregate national debt. We were running $1 to $2 trillion annual deficits, until recently $1 trillion trade deficit. These are unsustainable. And that will require, first of all, a major cutback in entitlements and unfunded liabilities. And how we do that when we have a bread and circuses attitude that people think the government owes them something rather than they owe the government, I don't know, but it's something we're going to have to deal with. And finally, immigration's gone haywire. We traded in the successful centuries-long melting pot for the salad bowl. DEI, we have reverted to tribalism. We continue down that pathway that your superficial appearance determines who you are, that it's essential rather than just incidental to you, your identity as a human, then we're going to end up like every tribal society, which is failure and pre-civilization reversion. Thank you very much. This is Victor Davis Hanson for the Daily Signal.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the heirloom barley. This will help to detoxify your body, bring down inflammation, and soak up free radicals. This stacks really well with the Boomer Boost. Now, what this will do is that it'll help to improve your cardiovascular health, help with your immune system, help with your endocrine system. But also, by bringing down inflammation, you'll be able to recover quicker after a workout. You'll help with your joint health because you're bringing down inflammation if you have, let's say, arthritis or sports injury. And also, by bringing down inflammation and soaking up free radicals at the brain level, you are improving brain function. It's really important to take the heirloom barley. Now, collagen is super important to help with your skin, nails, and hair, but also your musculature and bone density. It has a very comprehensive, typical amino acid profile for this collagen shown on the screen here. Please go to my store, get this collagen. It's a month's supply. Mix it with soft foods, filter water, a smoothie, or even milk. I mix it with hummus, but I take it to improve your health. It's super important. And another great product to stack with the collagen is the collagen. If you have a sports injury or osteoarthritis, all right, take the collagen and stack it with the collagen. Now, what collagen does is that it'll help to remodel the joint, remodel the cartilage, remodel the cushioning of the joint, but also block certain types of enzymes that cause damage to your joint. There are two such enzymes, MMP3 and MMP13, that erode joints when there is an injury or arthritis. You want to block those enzymes. So this will help to block MMP3 and MMP13 to prevent further joint erosion. In addition, collagen will help to block the inflammation enzyme Ep4 and reduce inflammation at the joint level. So this, by taking this every day, this will help to remodel that joint. And then you do some exercises on the soreness of that joint. Open up that joint up to the point of pain, and then just a little bit more, maybe a couple degrees more, and then hold it there for about 20 seconds or so. And do that a couple times a day or a few times a day. And over time, you'll notice that you'll be able to open up the joint more with less pain until you'll have full articulation. So you have to do these exercises, but also take the collagen, which will help to remodel the joint, and take the collagen, and you'll have the building blocks to remodel the cartilage and improve the joint health. Super important to do, all right? Especially when you get older. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the collagen and the collagen. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. All right. This is the BBC. Why did the U.S. war ceasefire talks collapse?
Hey, you little milk guzzler. Mom's boob is sore. Good thing Amazon Health AI can get her answers and help, even at 3 a.m. So all you have to do is sit there and look cute. Mommy loves you.
I think is that we're going to end up with a great deal.
Why did the Iran war negotiations collapse?
And I think we're in a very strong negotiating position to do what other presidents should have done during a 47-year period.
There'd been on-again, off-again speculation as to whether talks in Pakistan would actually go ahead. Until late Tuesday, Donald Trump posted on social media that the 2-week ceasefire with Iran would be extended with no end date given. And the blockade of Iranian ports would continue indefinitely.
And so this meant the talks in Islamabad were over. Was this a failure of diplomacy or a power play? From the BBC in London, I'm Asma Khalid.
And I'm Tristan Redmond, and this is The Global Story on YouTube.
Well, Paul, you're there in Islamabad, Pakistan. There were supposed to be these talks between the Americans and the Iranians. And as we all know, those talks didn't materialize as of this point. And so it kind of feels like you're at a party where the guests of honor never showed up. How's it been?
Yeah, and where the host is deeply, deeply disappointed. I mean, this was such a matter of pride for the Pakistani authorities. They really felt that if they could broker some kind of deal between Iran and the United States, that somehow would have a hugely enhancing effect on Pakistan's international reputation. They billed themselves as the one country that had good contacts in both Washington and Tehran. They thought that they could make this happen. Everything about the way this city was being prepared, with huge chunks of it being shut off, roads being closed, a big red zone in the middle, with hotels being evacuated. It all felt like they were getting ready for a big deal. And in fact, we all thought it was going to happen because we watched American C-17s coming in, bringing who knows what. There was all kinds of speculation.
I didn't realize that was already there, that the prep was there on the American side.
The prep may still be here for all we know. There could be a bunch of presidential limousines sitting out at a military airbase just on the off chance that this still happens. But right now you do get this slightly crushing sense of disappointment that somehow this has eluded Pakistan's grip.
I mean, you had a lot of political reporters in Washington following, well, why is J.D. Vance not yet on that plane? I mean, all day in Washington.
We were hearing that the pool was out there at Andrews Air Force Base getting ready to board the plane, only to be told, wait. You had Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner apparently flying up from Florida to join J.D. Vance, talk of all kinds of last-minute strategy meetings in the White House. But at some point late yesterday, clearly they thought this isn't going to happen right now. The Iranians, for their own reasons, are not showing up. It is one of those things where the Americans needed to see signs that the Iranians were about to leave Tehran, and the Iranians wanted to see the Americans in the air. Of course, the Iranians had the advantage of being many, many hours closer to Islamabad than Washington. So they were able in some ways to play this, and I think they did. There's an interesting video doing the rounds, which I think is the latest bit of social media fun being produced by the Iranians, in which you see Donald Trump waiting, saying that they're going to have great talks, but facing a row of empty chairs. He finally loses his temper, and then there's a caption that says, 2,000 years later, a message comes from the Iranians saying, stop shouting. And Donald Trump caves and says, okay, well, you can have an extended ceasefire. The Iranians are having a bit of fun with this. But this is, of course, no laughing matter. This is, there are hugely important issues at stake for both sides.
So there was a lot of back and forth all day long, a lot of guessing on whether the Americans or the Iranians would show up on Tuesday. And then at 4:15 East Coast time in Washington, D.C., we see a message posted online by President Trump. And I'm going to read part of this message because I do think it's really worthwhile to dissect it. He said,
it is
based on the fact that the government of Iran is seriously fractured. And then he goes on to say, we have been asked to hold our attack on the country of Iran until such time as their leaders and representatives can come up with a unified proposal. It's a much longer message, right? There's a lot of other details in there, but those two details to me were really, they caught my attention because it made me wonder, well, why did these talks really not materialize from the American side? The president of the United States seems to be saying, well, the Iranians aren't unified. They're not really bringing us a concrete proposal. Is that the crux of why they fell apart from your perspective on the American side?
Well, I mean, yeah, seriously fractured and unified proposal. You're absolutely right to highlight those two phrases. Now, either Washington wants everyone to think that the regime in Iran is weak, it's at sixes and sevens, it doesn't know which way to move, or this reflects a genuine concern in Washington, which has been voiced, by the way, not just by the administration, but also by many Iran watchers, which is what exactly is going on in Tehran. Donald Trump loves to trumpet the fact that he's achieved regime change, and maybe all he's achieved is regime fracture. And that is a rather dangerous place to be, because in the old days, 6 weeks or so ago, you had a supreme leader who clearly called the shots, who determined everything that was happening. When you had negotiations with the Iranians, you think back to the negotiations that resulted in the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. You kind of knew what the format was, who the players were, the interlocutors. The Iranians are supremely effective and efficient negotiators. They're tough. They do play for time, but you kind of knew who you were dealing with.
Say hello to Zero. See exactly where your business stands with no guesswork. Get instant, accurate reports so you can make smarter decisions. It's powerful enough for your accountant, simple enough for you. Try Zero today.
There's a slight sense now that the Americans don't know who they're dealing with. Are they dealing with a new supreme leader? If so, where is he and what state is he in? Has there been a kind of military coup in Tehran in which now, frankly, everything is decided by the Revolutionary Guards and that everyone else is sort of is secondary to that? It is difficult to know precisely what is going on. Various people have pointed out that when the first round of negotiations happened here, 10 days or so ago, the Iranians brought 80 people with them. Now, only about 30 of those people, an absolutely vast one. Now, they were all described as the delegation, but actually probably only about, people say only about 30 of them were properly members of the delegation. Others were, hardline newspaper commentators and an assortment of other people. And the one theory, and this is just a theory that I'm repeating here, is that at a time when Iran feels under enormous pressure, has been absolutely hammered in all sorts of ways since the very end of February, there is a need to make everyone a part of the debate, a part of the discussion, and a part of the outcome. And so you would have in the talks people who are highly skeptical, they're US hawks, and if they're in the room, if they're part of the delegation, they will be part of the outcome too.
Sharing the blame and the credit, so to speak.
Sharing the blame and the credit. And so that, I think, is certainly part of why the talks didn't happen this week. The other part, and this is what the Iranians say, is that they felt that the Americans were not serious. They felt that having offered to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, only for Donald Trump to say, you know what, I'm keeping my blockade of Iranian ports going, that indicated that, frankly, the Americans were, A, not interested in a deal, and B, actually trying to engineer another breakdown and a resumption of hostilities. So, that goes some way to, if you like, officially accounting for Iran's reluctance to get on the plane.
Can I put to you a third possible permutation of the Truth Social post that Asma just read out, Paul? I'd love to know what you make of it. It's the possibility that actually the Iranian negotiators might have outmaneuvered the Americans here, and that Donald Trump's Truth Social post is a face-saving device. I mean, Asma, for example, pointed out quite perspicaciously earlier on that it was a very carefully written Truth Social post, and not in the Donald Trump style. It didn't sound like it comes from him, and he does.
There's a lot more bombastic messages we've seen over the years as someone who's covered the president, right? The style, the tone of it felt a lot more measured, is all I'll say.
Do you think it might be a face-saving device?
I look, I think it is. I mean, I think it's a device to buy some time, clearly. Let's not forget a couple of big dates in Donald Trump's diary. He's got the king arriving on Monday.
Yeah.
That is a big deal for Donald Trump. And then he's going to China to meet President Xi, a couple of weeks after that. Does he really want to be at war with Iran when either of those two things happen? He most certainly does not. I think the feeling a few days ago here was there's not going to be a big, all-encompassing deal. The idea that somehow the nuclear issue and the new issue of the Strait of Hormuz can be negotiated away in a couple of sessions, even long sessions, was frankly for the birds. But maybe some kind of memorandum of understanding, an agreement that would essentially end the war, but kick all the tough issues ahead. That was perhaps the most likely, perhaps the preferable outcome of any negotiation. So absent that, he's gone for something that is a kind of hybrid. It's neither a declaration of peace, because he still has, a robust blockade of Iranian ports in force, but nor is it a development on the negotiating front either. It's a kind of odd hybrid. So we do now have essentially an open-ended ceasefire, and the possibility of a resumption of negotiations. Now the question is, when and where will those take place? Will they still be here, as the Pakistanis fondly hope? There's been interesting stuff coming out of Tehran in the last few days, suggesting that they are more than a little frustrated with what they see as Pakistan's failures. They don't see Pakistan as being a kind of down-the-middle honest broker. They are conscious that when the Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif announced the ceasefire, the wording of his tweet at that time and the way it all came out rather implied that the US and Pakistan between them were inviting Iran to a ceasefire. They think that the Pakistanis are bending over backwards to accommodate US interests, and some.
The bottom line is that the Shiites don't want to have a ceasefire. They want to escalate this. This is only going to end if we kill the theocratic regime. It can't be negotiated on paper. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the resveratrol. This will help you express your genes more youthfully. This will also help to get rid of senescent cells. It'll help to soak up free radicals and boost up the health of your mitochondria so you have more energy. And resveratrol helps the basal layer of your skin. It stacks really well with C60 to help with that basal layer. In addition, if you're 40 years of age or older, get the vitamin B complex. This will help the electron transport chain within your cells to produce more ATP. It will rev up your cellular metabolism, and vitamin B complex helps to protect neurons with vitamin B12. And I also have structural nanosilver soaps in stock. You can get peppermint. Please go to my store, get a few bars for your household. It's a very high quality soap. It'll help the pores of your skin. Use it every day, but it'll also help to neutralize because it has the structural nanosilver. It's a very high quality soap. Use it every day. And if you have pain from a bruise or a sprained ankle or arthritis or even a tension headache, get the Super Strong Relief. Apply it topically to the area that is painful. If you have a headache, put it around your forehead, around your temples and your shoulder and neck muscles, and it'll relieve the pain within 90 seconds. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the Super Strong Relief. Again, this is for tension headache, bruising, sore muscles, and arthritis. Or even a sprain. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
Commentators have been going on Iranian TV pointing out that they do not think that Pakistan is an honest broker. Now that obviously is very damaging for Pakistan, which really wants to be seen as precisely that. And it does make you wonder, if and when there is another round, will it be Pakistan hosting? I think at the moment it's the only show in town. Would we see Oman getting back into the mediating
Who was
game?
negotiating originally, right, before the strikes on Iran began?
They were, and of course they rather angered the White House by suggesting that not only was a deal on the table, but that the US negotiators, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, either didn't understand the issues involved or chose to misrepresent them, setting the scene for the outbreak of the war literally within, 24 hours of the breakdown of those talks. So, Oman felt burned by that. So at the moment, it's not clear who or how or when or even if any of this is going to resume.
To your point about why the talks didn't materialize and the lack of trust that the Iranians have for the Trump administration, our colleague Lise Doucette has been reporting from Iran this week. And earlier in the week, she interviewed a spokesperson for the Iranian Foreign Ministry, Ismail Baghai, who we understand was in the room for the last round of talks. And he essentially spoke to this point.
Watch videos on top as you browse, boost audio volume, and quickly access streams from the sidebar.
So far, no decision has been made. And I think the reason is very clear, because of the confusing messages we have been receiving from the United States. Literally speaking, there have been many violations of ceasefire. You know that during the course of the past 2 days, they have attacked Iranian vessels. They have taken hostage our people on board vessel Tuska. And at the same time, they're continuing with their threats of war crimes, threats of genocide, bombing our bridges and power plants. So this is not the behavior of a country that is really serious about a diplomatic process.
What do you think of that, Paul?
He's not the only one pointing out mixed messages from the White House. And, you know, blustering rhetoric, apocalyptic rhetoric one day and then offers of ceasefire the next. You know, it may be designed to throw everyone off, but for the Iranians who have their own sense of how these things should be conducted, and they are sticklers for the details, this is discombobulating to say the least. And it all helps to create an impression that the White House is not serious. So, you know, I think it's not at all surprising to hear him talk in those terms. Of course, you know, he is glossing over the fact that it was Iran that turned the Strait of Hormuz into a weapon in this war. I think the United States has, and the Trump administration has kind of thrown them off their game by saying, I see your blockade and I raise you. And, you know, it was I think the fact that now you have two blockades in place, each one inflicting pain, one on the Iranian economy and one on the global economy, has complicated matters for Iran. It feels that this weapon that it has utilized so effectively has somehow been turned around and used against it. And so we do have this situation in which, they feel that they don't quite, just as the Americans don't quite know what Iran is up to, I think Iran doesn't quite know what America is up to, and certainly doesn't trust them.
We're speaking to you on Wednesday, and the original ceasefire was supposed to expire on Wednesday. It had a 2-week timeline, a 2-week time frame. This new extension we've seen announced by President Trump doesn't seem to have a timeline. And it is amidst all that uncertainty that we're also seeing reports from Iranian media that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps says it has seized ships near the Strait of Hormuz. I guess I'm wondering, what does that all mean in terms of escalation or de-escalation?
Look, you know, we are seeing kinetic activity in the Gulf by both sides. Each side has fired on vessels that it regards as having breached the conditions or the terms of their own blockades. That is a combustible situation. Right now, it is only combustible on the water. But I think you would have to be a pretty bold person to put a bet on this not escalating into a resumption of hostilities. Israel, who we haven't really mentioned, would dearly like to finish the job as it sees it. And is pretty apprehensive at the thought of some kind of negotiated deal, sort of in the middle of a war which is unfinished. This is not a...
Okay. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nano silver gels. You can get it in the quick dispenser or in the tube form. Use them the same way. They're dual purpose. If you have a cut, an abrasion, or a minor burn, put it on the lesion. It'll help to heal it about 1/3 of the time quicker. You can also use it as daily skincare, topically. And if you're not feeling well or someone around you is not feeling well during the cold season, put it on your hands. It stays active for 5.5 hours, but you can also put it around your eyes, around your nose, around your mouth, around your ears, and lightly coat your nostrils. Again, it stays active for 5.5 hours. You can't do that with Perel. So please go to my store, get this dual purpose structural nano silver. It helps to neutralize. It's very high quality. And it's important to have in your home. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, now what we're going to do is take a look at All right, let's listen in here. Iranian activist praises Trump, reveals worst case scenario for terror regime.
If you're not using a business travel platform like Navan, you're really missing out. Hi, I'm Ellie, and I'm the people operator.
This morning, as peace talks remain stalled in Iran, President Trump pointed to a positive sign, claiming the 8 female protesters he asked the regime to spare not be executed, and guess what? They were saved. The president says 4 of them will be released, the other 4 given a 4-month sentence, as the White House emphasizes his humanitarian concerns. Our next guest was born and raised in Tehran before coming to America in 2019. Iranian activist Sana Ibrahimi joins us now. Sana, great to see you. First off, on the sparing of these women, your thoughts about are the Iranians going to continue to spare their lives?
Well, let me start by this. No president in the past 47 years, no U.S. president, has cared about the plight of Iranian people more than President Trump. So that's that. On the issue of their execution, no charges were dropped. Their executions have been postponed. That's amazing news. At the same time, we have to remember, these are not the only execution cases. This morning, I woke up to the news of one more person, one more political prisoner getting executed. In the past 2 days, 4 people have been executed. And according to human rights organizations in Iran, more than 53,000 people were arrested after January 8th and January 9th. Now, we have 72 confirmed death sentences. And the Chief Justice of Iran, Mohsen Ejei, have vowed for speedy trials and no leniency, which means death sentences under the charges of treason, working for Mossad, and waging war against God. So these are the cases that are awaiting their death.
And I heard you guys have an all-time high of executions that dates back to 1989, over 1,500. That's prior even to the massive protests that you have. What is the attitude on the ground? You still have ways to contact people in Iran. How do they feel about this whole conflict?
It's horrible. Just imagine that an illegitimate terrorist regime has shut down the internet on 90 million people. Now, people barely get to contact their families. Like, they use point of contacts, like some people that have access to maybe Starlink or VPNs that they can contact and follow, like check in on their families. But what we hear is a horrible economical situation. Things are not affordable. Day-to-day life, people struggle. Businesses have been closed. Some people have lost their jobs due to internet shutdown. And these are the facts on the ground. So even if things end today, even if the regime surrenders today, the economical situation is there.
Right.
And there is going to be a massive disaster for the regime on the ground.
So I was just looking at the Shah's son. He says he traveled to Europe. He says there's a massive disconnect between the reality on the ground in Iran and how this is perceived a war of choice by an American president who didn't think this out. That's not your perception. You think on the ground this is an evil regime that needs to be stopped, that lives to destroy the West.
Yes, it lives to destroy the West, and it lives to destroy Iranians as well. I mean, think about
This is the point that I've been making. The only way this is going to end is destroying the IRGC, the theocratic regime, and truncate the Shia stronghold in Iran.
it. They killed tens of thousands of people in 2 days just for protesting for their basic rights. I mean, what kind of legitimate government does that? What kind of legitimate government with a base of support in Iran would shut down the internet to stop the flow of information? So people on the ground, what they think about is that the worst case scenario after these peace talks is the Islamic government in place, Islamic Republic surviving this war would be the absolute worst case scenario for the people. And I personally believe that you cannot really negotiate with savage terrorists because they will never be faithful to their promise. They will never keep their promises. Yep. And they have shown that previously. I mean, with President Biden, President Obama, what did they do?
I hear you. But I guess we're in the situation now where you got to get them in where they have no choice. But we'll see. Maybe it's going to go back to bombing. Sana, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the vitamin D3. This is a gene expression cofactor, so your cells work properly. It'll also help to absorb calcium, to build denser bone, do some resistance training. Also, vitamin D3 is super important for your cardiovascular system. Stack it with K2 and K7. And structural nanosilver toothpaste. This will whiten your teeth, freshen your breath, neutralize, also help with your gum line and reduce inflammation at the gum line. Super important to use every day, but especially during the winter season. Why? Because it's the structural nanosilver to neutralize. And with good oral hygiene, you're going to help with your cardiovascular health and your valvular health. This toothpaste, this structural nanosilver toothpaste has no fluoride. So please go to my store, use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. Click the link, go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, let's listen into Bloomberg here when they were talking about oil steadies as U.S.-Iran talks stall, keeping Hormuz blocked.
Robots who walk, talk, and perform tasks just like us. It's the stuff of science fiction, right?
The robots are able to mirror human behavior. They can go where humans shouldn't or can't. Now we have robots delivering technology for good in our society.
Equity indices built on opinions? That's the old way. The new way is Bloomberg Equity Indices.
I think that people are unaware of how bad this is. You know, certainly at a US level, there's just not that much evidence of it. And as you know, the gasoline price here is actually relatively cheap globally. American incomes are higher. So the impact here is not being felt. But what we can see here, Tom, is a guaranteed ongoing deterioration of the situation for at least 2 months. And that's pretty scary for us.
But the data, Brent, I look at in the terminal was a 144 OMG, and it's come down.
Yeah.
Are you seeing a lessening of price pressure in the what I'll call the cash, the physical market?
Not really if you think about jet fuel and distillate. So that's the issue. And that's why the crude price has become so difficult to second guess, because you've lost probably 6 million barrels a day of refining capacity here almost directly. That's 6 million barrels a day of crude demand. And that, of course, is why you've got this massive arbitrage between the jet price, the distillate price, and the crude price. And so what we're really looking at is how jet is doing. We hit a high of $300 a barrel for jet in Asia. We come back probably down towards 200 right now. And then, in Europe, you've seen probably a peak of 200 barrels a day, and you're back down and holding about, let's say, 170. So these are enormous prices, Tom, that, that's the cutting edge, because obviously what you're really looking at, the oil price and oil demand, is the product. The crude is just so complicated by the tanker situation and everything else. It's hard to really decide where that crude price should be.
Why do you say 2 months, Paul? I've got a president that's saying the war is won, just a matter of days, we'll get peace. Why do you suggest the pain may be longer term?
Because of the difference that Tom's referring to, which is the physical and the paper. Okay. So the paper will act crazy and will react to the headlines, but the physical is a physical fact, a fact of physics, literally. And the physics involve tankers, and the tankers are in all the wrong places. A lot of them are trapped. 20% of the capacity that's out is effectively 10% of tankers, plus the fact that those Middle Eastern tankers are baseload tankers. They run all year, running, round the clock. They're not shadow tankers. They're not, wobbly tankers. They are the tankers that run the baseload, and they're trapped. So in that regard, the tanker situation is going to take at least 4 weeks even optimistically 4 weeks. And then, of course, you have the infrastructure damage that's happened within those huge facilities. The LNG damage, the refining.
Do we know anything about that? Has there been valid reporting?
I tell you what's scary is if you look at that Qatar LNG attack that hit 2 trains, the Iranians hit the 2 Exxon trains. I don't think that was an accident. I think that was Russian intelligence. So there's some very scary things out there.
What can the U.S. do here? We've become a net, exporter of oil here. Can our guys down in Texas and Oklahoma just start fracking?
I was actually on a panel at the New York Energy Forum this week with Kees van 't Hof, the Diamondback CEO, one of the best CEOs, young CEOs we've got. And he was saying, look, the future strip is $72 a barrel for next year. What am I going to do with that? I'm going to drill more for 72? No, that's the, that's the marginal economics. Am I going to hedge at 72, you know, to spend more knowing I'll get 72? Of course he's not. So the price is really disincentivizing a solution there. And then I'll just add that, you know, unfortunately, the Iranians know what they've got. And so, you know, what they want is a load of red line things. You know, it's literally like the U.S. out of the, you know, U.S. military out of the Gulf states. I mean, these are huge asks. And we've heard GCC members saying they will not pay a toll. So you got some stuff here that's intractable.
In the time we got left, I really want to do this to just parse it.
All right, before he gets there, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the structural nano silver Max 35 or cleanse. Take a teaspoon a day every day, and this will boost up your innate immune system. It'll help to neutralize, help to improve your oral cavity and your oral pharynx, maintain a mucosal barrier, and help the health of your epithelial cells. Super important to take every day. I've been doing this for over 6 years, every day, a teaspoon a day. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the Max 35 or the cleanse. As part of a overall anti-aging protocol, and that anti-aging protocol is very simple. The multivitamin and the probiotics is the foundation. The first pillar, the Max 35 or cleanse. Second pillar, C60s, soak up free radicals. The third pillar, turmeric, ashwagandha, and lignans to improve your cardiovascular health and your immune system. And Boomer Boost to rev up your cellular metabolism and increase your energy levels. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last.
This is University of Manchester years ago, before his just incredible career across this. And this is the chemistry you and I learned. So I got C2H6. I got oil, and I'm cracking it out to ethane. The Chinese, as an example, really, really, really need ethane. They can't get it. They're taking it from America. You take C2H6, you add some kind of heat to it, you know better than me. Boom, you got ethylene, C2H4, and 2 hydrogens go off into the air. The entire media, what I just said, is Greek. But the answer is, this is really what matters, like to the Chinese, to Indonesia, and to Qatar, right?
Yeah, and I'd add to that China's over 90% dependent for ethane, ethane on the U.S. So this came out very clearly during tariffs, that, you know, they are highly dependent on that U.S. flow. And you're seeing the other guys in Asia where they're dependent on naphtha, which gets you the same effect through oil more directly, as opposed to ethane coming from natural gas. And in naphtha, you have 60% less supply to Asian petrochemicals. So our first move here was, one of the very first moves we did was start looking at Taiwan and TSMC. But we concluded that because they're a government company, they're going to keep going somehow. But they definitely will have a helium problem within 2 months. And that becomes a question for the whole AI. The latest thing that we're seeing from Japan is a solvent issue, and this gets into really complicated, you know, sub-ethylene products. But these solvents are vital for chip making as well, and the Japanese chain is very Japanese. So they take the naphtha from abroad and do everything within Japan. Losing the naphtha breaks the chain and seems to mean that you're going to have a real struggle making the chips. Okay. So yeah, you're right. And these are the supply chain issues that we're more focused on the demand side, because there's not much point in us talking about the Strait.
How does this redound back to tweets coming out at 7 a.m. from the President of the United States?
About marijuana?
No, I don't mean about marijuana. I mean about ethane, methyl ethyl ketone, and the rest of it, the real world chemistry that's flat on its back.
Well, you know, Tom, I always say that there's only one barrier of entry to being an oil analyst, and that's units and obviously and physics. And frankly, the understanding, you know, through the chain of politicians. If you look at, I've listed every single major oil CEO in the US as an engineer, every single one. And if you look at politicians, I don't think you'll find one. Another extreme example is Greta is high school level educated. I don't think she could have said what you just said about C2, C3. So, you know, the reality is, and ultimately we've seen a story here where the conspiracy is in oil is a conspiracy of ignorance. People just don't understand it.
Do you want to know the truth?
Yeah.
Professor Beeler, organic chemistry, inorganic chemistry, physical chemistry, The only reason I got through it, he sat in row 4 at the ice rink. that is the only way I got through.
Well, I thought you had me on the ropes there.
Did you have Morrison and Boyd in organic chemistry, like 800 pages?
I'm a Manchester University history and economics grad.
I know.
But one thing I'll tell you,
one
thing I'll tell you, Tom, is that the reason that Manchester it always rains is because it was built in a rain shadow of the Pennines for the water mills, for the mills.
Yeah.
And so it's built for the factories to run on water, and that's why it always rains in Manchester.
Right.
So,
how cool was Man City this week? I mean, that was really.
True Mancunians are going to get a lot of hate mail for this. True Mancunians typically support City.
Yeah, I understand.
And, they always say there's more Cockney Reds for United. But no, I'm happy for them. It's great. It's they really outplayed Arsenal, I felt. And, my family history is from Woolwich, where the original Arsenal was, where they made the guns that are on the. My great-grandfather and grandfather worked at the original Arsenal. And if you want to cheer up, my father was evacuated from London as a boy because the Germans were bombing the Arsenal so much that it was unsafe for kids.
Yeah.
So when people get too depressed about the world, I always say, well, we're not at the stage.
John Farrow's told me about Coventry was just leveled.
Coventry was absolutely leveled. And someone was pointing out, I'd mentioned in a note that Rotterdam was redesigned by the Germans in the war. And, it became the biggest container port and obviously a huge focus for oil markets.
All right, that's the end of my show. Thank you for listening. Please make sure you subscribe to all my channels. If you like the work that I do, please help support it by sharing the links, asking your social media to follow me, and get the great products that are on my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.